Hello, my YouTube family, and welcome back to the Crime Whisper. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before you get comfortable and let your mind wander, I have a small request. Leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy following these cases. Now, settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let's begin story 1. The foul discovery on the Credit River. It was early in the morning of August 15, 2012. A Toronto Star reporter decided to take a walk along the banks of the Credit River. On the outskirts of the city, his plan was simple: capture the sunrise for his latest assignment. The morning was quiet, the air crisp, and the gentle lapping of water against the riverbank almost meditative. But as he wandered along the sandy edge, he suddenly stopped. A sharp, foul odor pierced the calm morning air. It wasn't the usual fishy smell one might expect near the river. This was different. It was a scent that immediately unsettled him, a pungent, chemical-like stench that made his stomach turn. His mind raced back to recent events. Just 3 months earlier, Toronto had been rocked by a horrific crime: the murder and dismemberment of Chinese international student Lin Jun. Though he had never met her, the journalist's instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Cautiously, he moved closer to the source. Partially hidden under a thin layer of sand and debris, he spotted a gray plastic bag lying in the sand. The smell was emanating from it. He didn't dare open it himself. Instead, he pulled out his phone and immediately contacted the local authorities. The gruesome find: when police arrived, they carefully opened the bag, and what they found sent chills down their spines. Inside was a severely decomposed human foot. The discovery prompted an immediate escalation. Within hours, over 50 officers were dispatched to the scene. A 3-meter radius around the bag became a cordoned-off zone. Police meticulously scoured every inch of the area, their trained eyes combing through the brush, sand, and waterlogged banks. By the next afternoon, their grim task bore more horrific fruit. Another foot, 2 hands, and even a human head were found at separate locations along the riverbank. Days of soaking in water had swollen and decomposed the body parts to the point where they were nearly unrecognizable. Even seasoned forensic experts from Toronto were momentarily overwhelmed by the grotesque scene, yet professionalism prevailed. They regrouped, collected the remains, and worked tirelessly to identify the victim. It wasn't long before forensic analysis confirmed that all the body parts belonged to a single individual, a woman between 35 and 45 years old. The police noted over 30 separate injuries on her head, which indicated a brutal homicide. They began reconstructing her skull in an attempt to restore her face. No matter how disfigured, this painstaking work finally revealed the identity of the victim: Lu Guan, a 41-year-old immigrant from Fuhan, China. Lu Guan, a life of determination before her tragic death. Lu ran a massage parlor named Forget Me Not in Scarborough, Toronto. Her life, on the surface, seemed prosperous, but like many immigrants, her path had been fraught with struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. Lu had 2 sons. Her older son, Dano, was 21 at the time of her death, born during Lu's first marriage. Dano had lived through turbulent times after 6 years of marriage. Lu divorced and later remarried, giving birth to her second son, but due to financial hardship and legal restrictions in China, she couldn't afford the fines imposed for having a second child. Fearful for their safety, Lu fled China under the cover of night with Dano. They first went to Taiwan, then Thailand, and finally Canada. Once in Toronto, Lu destroyed her passport and staged a dramatic appeal to immigration authorities. She told a harrowing story of persecution, unlawful detention, and violent beatings in China. Her performance was convincing, even moving, and it earned her a priority refugee visa, along with financial support from the Canadian government. With time, Lu used these resources to build a comfortable life. She purchased a townhouse and began renting rooms to fellow immigrants, from penniless refugee to landlady. Lou seemed to have it all, but her success was shadowed by complexity to maintain her image as an attractive, single woman. She required Dano to hide his true identity, forbidding him from acknowledging their mother-son relationship. Publicly, her life became a delicate balance of appearances, business, and personal relationships. She bought a massage parlor from a fellow Fuhan immigrant and expanded her social network, dating men from various cultural and racial backgrounds. This created a tangled web of relationships, each more complex than the last. The investigation moves in after identifying the victim. Toronto police began following standard investigative procedures, starting with those closest to her naturally. Dano, her eldest son, was among the first to be questioned, although the idea of a child harming their parents seemed extreme. Investigators couldn't dismiss any possibilities. Cases of children committing parricide, while rare, were not unheard. Aftano shared what he knew on the day his mother disappeared. Her boyfriend, Kenneth Gratzky, had visited the house. Lou had mentioned needing to step out for business, leaving Dano behind. Since then, she hadn't returned. Dano noted that his mother had occasionally gone missing for days in the past, but Kenneth's frantic calls made this disappearance different. In fact, Dano recalled that Kenneth had previously reported a major argument with Lou on July 30th. Following that fight, she had temporarily moved out, though the two remained in contact until August 10th, the day Lou supposedly left for business and vanished. Kenneth confirmed he had tried repeatedly to reach her, even contacting Dano when she didn't answer her phone. This pattern struck police as suspicious, and they decided to visit Kenneth to notify him of Lou's death and to investigate further. The shocking twist when the police knocked on Kenneth's door. They were met not by him, but by another man. The man was strikingly handsome, calm, and composed when asked if this was Kenneth's residence. He confirmed it was. Then the officers asked who he was. "I'm his boyfriend," the man replied. This revelation stunned the police. Kenneth, the man in a relationship with Lou, also had a boyfriend. Hilbert, as he was called, lived with Kenneth, making Kenneth's romantic life far more complicated than they had imagined. Lou, it seemed, had been part of a triangle she might never have anticipated would come under scrutiny. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Not only were there questions about Lou's disappearance and murder, but also about the dynamics within her social and romantic circles. Kenneth's dual relationship suggested possible motives, jealousy, and conflicts that could have escalated into violence. Police reconstruct the case as investigators pieced together the timeline. They focused on Lou's last known movements, her business dealings, and her personal relationships. They reviewed phone records, bank statements, and interviews with tenants and acquaintances. Slowly, a picture began to emerge of a woman whose life was as intricate and multifaceted as the crimes surrounding her. Death. The police examined Kenneth's behavior closely. His frantic calls and insistence that Lou had gone missing raised questions. Was his concern genuine, or was it a cover for something darker? Meanwhile, Dano's testimony added a different perspective. The careful, obedient son, living in the shadow of a mother who demanded secrecy and control of Lou's professional life, became part of the investigation. Her massage parlor, a modest business, might have exposed her to people with grudges, enemies, or dangerous tendencies. Each lead required careful consideration. The Toronto Police, EXPERIENCED, in handling complex homicide cases, worked tirelessly to untangle the web of relationships, motives, and opportunities, building a profile of the victim. Understanding Lou's personality and history became crucial. She had escaped persecution, navigated immigration bureaucracy, and built a life from scratch. Yet, her drive for independence and control created tension with those around her. Her insistence on Dano concealing his identity, her entanglements with multiple partners, and her expansion of business ventures all painted a portrait of a woman navigating survival, ambition, and desire. Investigators also noted the psychological complexity of the case. Lou's life choices, the secrecy she demanded, and the multiple relationships in play suggested that her murder might not have been random. There were financial, emotional, and interpersonal stakes involved. Each angle needed exploration at this point. The investigation was intensifying, with each discovery raising more questions than answers. Kenneth's dual relationships, Lou's secretive life, and the sheer brutality of the crime all combined into a chilling narrative of deception, ambition, and violence. A love triangle like no other. Lu Guan's life, it seemed, had always been intricate, but by 2012, it had evolved into a web of relationships more complicated than most could imagine. Kenneth, her boyfriend at the time, was not only romantically involved with her, he also shared a home with another man named Hilbert. Hilbert was Kenneth's boyfriend. In other words, Lou was part of a menage, a complicated living arrangement where the boundaries between love, loyalty, and desire were constantly tested. The police, curious about the dynamics in Kenneth's household, asked Hilbert to summon Kenneth, who was asleep in the bedroom when Kenneth was informed of Lou's death. His reaction was immediate, and heart-wrenching tears welled in his eyes as he embraced Hilbert, who murmured soothingly, "Don't cry. Don't cry." The scene was almost cinematic, a man caught between grief, love, and the weight of unspeakable secrets. The investigators, however, did not linger on emotion. They pressed for facts. "How did you and Lou meet?" they asked. Kenneth inhaled deeply, gathering his thoughts before recounting the story. Before meeting Lou, Kenneth identified as purely homosexual. He had never had a girlfriend, and had always considered his relationships with men as the only possibility. But one day, after a heated argument with his boyfriend, Hilbert, he found himself wandering into Lou's massage parlor, almost by accident from the first moment. Lou saw something in Kenneth with the keen eye of a seasoned businesswoman and the experience of a woman who had navigated countless human behaviors. She noticed his naivety, his inexperience in romantic encounters with women, and his vulnerability. Using her expertise in massage and her innate understanding of human desire, Lou created experiences for Kenneth that were entirely new, entirely unexpected. It wasn't long before Kenneth became a regular customer. He was drawn not just to her skillful hands, but also to her charisma, her presence, and the magnetic pull of a woman who seemed to command every room she entered. However, Kenneth's orientation and internal conflict made their relationship volatile. Arguments erupted frequently, and after each quarrel, Kenneth would lavish her with gifts, pay off debts, and apologize profusely. Eventually, Kenneth suggested that Lou move in with him, claiming his home was spacious and would be convenient for her work. She agreed, seeing the practical advantage of proximity and companionship. But Kenneth's home also housed Hilbert. Thus, the three of them lived together in an arrangement that was both intimate and ambiguous, blurring lines that conventional society might find difficult to comprehend. The business and the tensions. Kenneth had invested in Lou's massage parlor, providing her the financial means to realize her dream of business ownership. But while Lou became the official owner, she often worked directly with clients, sometimes crossing professional boundaries. This caused repeated friction between the two. Arguments became almost routine, the most recent significant one occurring on July 30th. Just weeks before her disappearance that day, Lou left in anger after a heated confrontation about her professional conduct and the blurring of personal and business boundaries. Kenneth tried to reconcile, offering apologies, gifts, and even suggesting that she sell the parlor and return home to a stable life with him and Hilbert. Lou, pragmatic and perhaps charmed by the material security and attention, reluctantly agreed to reconcile, but her independent streak remained. The next morning, Kenneth and Hilbert traveled over 60 miles to Port Hope for a gathering. At the time, police remained skeptical of Kenneth's story, yet Kenneth provided an important clue. On the day Lou disappeared, she had intended to transport electrical appliances from her parlor to another lover's home. Zhang Chuan. Kenneth had met Zhang before, describing him as a man of medium height, slightly thin, and someone who could have posed a threat to Lou. He suspected that if she had gone to Zhang's house, something terrible might have happened. The police, following this lead, went immediately to Zhang's residence there. Zhang presented himself as calm, almost rehearsed. He claimed to be 39, originally from Shanghai, and had once worked as a chef on a Chinese ocean-going ship. According to him, on a dark, windy night in Montreal, he had jumped ship with nothing but a piece of bread, traveling over 300 miles to Toronto to start a new life. He portrayed himself as a man of faith and determination, claiming persecution as a Catholic in China, and invoked a famous saying, "An army can be stripped of its general, but a man cannot be deprived of his will." His story, steeped in drama and sacrifice, had convinced Canadian immigration authorities. Not only was he granted legal status, but he was also commended for his perseverance. He even brought his mother over to Canada, establishing a life in Toronto. Lu's involvement with Zhang explained his history with Lu. Initially, she had rented a home to him, but their relationship evolved beyond landlord and tenant at the time. Lu had a large black boyfriend, while Zhang had his own girlfriend, yet Lu pursued him relentlessly, and they became involved when Lu became pregnant. She demanded responsibility. Zhang, however, considered the affair casual and refused to betray his existing relationship. This rejection enraged Lu, who confronted him, demanding acknowledgement. Zhang, realizing the potential complications of a child, attempted to placate her with gifts, trips to New York City, and material promises. Under the lure of these material comforts, Lu reluctantly agreed to an abortion. Zhang's promises, however, were empty. He returned to his previous behavior, leaving Lu to navigate her tangled web of relationships largely on her own. But it is critical to understand, Lu was far from a passive victim. She maintained multiple lovers, carefully managing and selecting relationships to suit her desires and ambitions. Even while living with Kenneth, she did not abandon her liaison with Zhang. She would often escape to his home for comfort after quarrels, creating a pattern of conflict, reconciliation, and betrayal. It was during this period that Zhang discovered Dano's existence, learning that Lu's son lived in the household. Zhang used this knowledge strategically, asserting that Lu's demands and obligations made any serious future with him impossible. The escalating conflict. By July 30th, tensions reached a breaking point. Lu argued with Kenneth, and in a moment of rebellion and defiance, moved into Zhang's house. He allowed her to stay temporarily, but imposed strict conditions. She could not remain indefinitely. Lu's frustration with her mother, her son, and the complicated web of men in her life had reached a boiling point. Each day of her life seemed like a calculated maneuver, balancing affection, loyalty, independence, and survival. This complex network of relationships, Kenneth and Hilbert, Zhang, and various other boyfriends, presented a nightmare scenario for investigators. Each person had a potential motive, a possible secret, and a unique perspective on Lu's final days. The police had to untangle this labyrinth carefully, following leads step by step, wary of falsehoods and misdirection. The investigation tightens with Lu's disappearance, now a homicide investigation. Every detail of her personal and professional life became critical. Police documented her movements, scrutinized her communications, and interviewed tenants, lovers, and friends. They sought to reconstruct not just her physical path, but also the emotional and relational context that could explain her death. Kenneth's cooperation was invaluable, providing insight into Lu's habits, her disputes, and her interactions with other men. Hilbert, though less vocal, offered corroboration of Kenneth's statements and shed light on the household dynamics. Zhang, but evasive, became a person of interest, particularly because of the timing and nature of Lu's visits. Lu's approach to relationships was as strategic as it was provocative. She navigated her world with an almost predatory awareness, knowing when to charm, when to manipulate, and when to assert control. It was this intelligence, combined with her ambitions and independence, that made her story both fascinating and tragic. At this point, the investigation had layered complexity. Lu's multiple relationships, her son's secretive role, her business entanglements, and the unpredictable behavior of her lovers created a perfect storm. The police had begun to map out motives, opportunities, and alibis, but the truth was still hidden in the shadows, as it turned out. The weekend held special significance in Lu's life. Her mother worked as a housekeeper for someone else, and typically only returned home on weekends, but on the evening Lu disappeared. Everything shifted dramatically. Zhang Chuan, the man who had become her lover amidst this tangled web, revealed to the police that he had just finished dinner with Lu that evening. He had personally driven her back to the massage parlor then. According to his account, he saw her get into Kenneth's car and drive away after that. He claimed he had not seen her again and suspected Kenneth of foul play. The officers looked at Zhang silently, scrutinizing him. Something about his demeanor unsettled them. Kenneth, meanwhile, had a solid alibi. He had been at a gathering in Port Hope with Hilbert, witnessed by dozens of people, so how could Zhang insist he saw Kenneth drive Lu away? Clearly, something in his story didn't add up. He was lying. Noticing a wound on Zhang's forehead, the police inquired about its origin. Flustered, he said he had bumped into something while moving items, but the officers were experienced enough to recognize the truth. The long, jagged wound was consistent with a knife cut. Zhang was clearly hiding something. To verify the timeline, investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the day Lu disappeared. The footage showed her entering Zhang's house, but she never came out the next afternoon. Zhang's car trunk contained a large suitcase, which he had removed, but never returned home. The police immediately flagged this as suspicious behavior, indicative of potential criminal activity. However, they didn't immediately make an arrest. Instead, someone was assigned to monitor Zhang's house covertly. Why not act immediately, you might ask? The police needed to ensure they had undeniable evidence before taking decisive action. And sure enough, soon after, surveillance revealed that Zhang and his mother were meticulously washing his car inside and out, likely attempting to destroy evidence. Furious at the apparent cover-up, the police quickly applied for a search warrant, discovering the horror once inside Zhang's house. A faint, unpleasant odor hinted at something terrible hidden inside. The officers traced the smell to the basement, where they discovered that a section of the floor had been replaced without toothpaste tiles, using a fluorescent reagent. They confirmed that a large quantity of blood had been present. Their further inspection revealed a blood-stained glove in a drawer and several gray plastic bags identical to those used to transport Lu's body parts, blood splatters, and traces of the victims. DNA were also found in Zhang's car trunk, despite his attempts to sanitize the scene. The police's forensic methods ensured that critical evidence remained. Armed with this evidence, the police arrested Zhang and charged him with first-degree murder. Interestingly, Zhang's mother was allowed to remain in the house, and the crime scene was not immediately sealed, as investigators continued piecing together the chain of events. Since September 3rd, a suitcase was discovered floating in Lake Ontario. Inside was Lu Guan's torso. The rest of her body had been dismembered and disposed of in the surrounding area. The suitcase was the same style and color as the one Zhang had transported from his house, further strengthening the link between him and the crime. The dilemma despite the overwhelming evidence, police faced a major problem. The murder weapon had yet to be recovered, and without it, they could not conclusively prove who had killed Lu. Zhang refused to confess, insisting that the evidence only proved a death occurred in his home. It didn't prove his involvement. "I am innocent," he maintained, leaving investigators at a frustrating impasse. Then, on September 9th, a new complication arose. Neighbors reported a foul odor emanating from Zhang's house. When the police went to investigate, they discovered that his mother had died. The coroner later determined that her death had been sudden, due to heart disease. Zhang requested temporary release to handle her funeral arrangements, promising to return and provide a full confession. Prosecutors were optimistic, thinking the case might finally reach closure, but Zhang had a shocking revelation in store. Facing investigators, he declared, I won't hide anything anymore, actually. Lou was killed by my mother. The room fell silent. Prosecutors were stunned, struggling to comprehend what he had just said. The shocking confession. Zhang explained that his mother had long disliked Lou. She disapproved of her being married twice, having children from previous relationships, and working in what she considered an impure massage business. On the evening of the incident, Zhang, his mother, and Lou had been having dinner when his mother arrived home early. Unexpectedly, argument broke out between the two women. Lou reportedly insulted Zhang's mother, calling her old and unreasonable, while his mother accused Lou of being shameless and depraved and of stealing a valuable piece of jewelry. Whether or not the theft had occurred was unclear. But tensions escalated quickly. According to Zhang, his mother retrieved a cleaver from the kitchen, intending to attack Lou. In a desperate attempt to intervene, Zhang tried to stop them. Sustaining the knife wound on his forehead, he then retreated to the bathroom to tend to the injury. When he returned, he found Lou lying on the floor, with his mother still attacking her. Zhang's account. After several minutes, his mother realized what she had done. Panicked, she asked Zhang, "I've killed someone. What should we do?" Afraid to report his own mother, Zhang claimed they decided to dismember the body and dispose of it in different locations, using garbage bags to carry the parts. Investigating the mother, the police couldn't rely solely on Zhang's testimony. They needed independent evidence to confirm the story. The autopsy of Zhang's mother revealed severe heart disease, and medications for her condition were found in the house. Mr. Shi, her employer, described her as quiet, hard-working, but in poor health. Investigators struggled to reconcile the facts. How could a 70-year-old woman overpower a 40-year-old? Lou and stab her repeatedly. If she initiated the attack, why did Lou apparently offer no resistance to more than 30 fatal wounds? These questions created doubt, leaving the police to carefully balance Zhang's confession with the forensic evidence. Even with the mother as the purported assailant, questions remained. Had she truly acted alone? Had Zhang's account exaggerated or altered events to protect himself? The investigation required painstaking analysis of every detail: the crime scene, the wounds, the timeline, and the relationships among the three people involved. The more the police examined Zhang's account, the more they suspected that he was fabricating parts of his story. Yet perhaps even Zhang himself felt uncertain about the credibility of his own words. On the third day of the trial, he stunned the courtroom by suddenly altering his testimony. I finished treating my wound and came out," he began haltingly, "and I saw Lou. She was already dead on the floor. My mother was just hacking at her body, venting her anger." The judge, trying to maintain composure, asked sharply, "Then how did she die? Who killed her?" Zhang stammered, confusion clear on his face. I wonder about that too. How did she suddenly die? Who killed her?" The courtroom erupted with incredulity and outrage. The judge, inwardly incredulous, could hardly fathom what sort of scoundrel he had encountered. He pressed on, demanding clarity. "Why did you lie before, claiming your mother was the killer?" Zhang's response was flippant, almost defiant. "Why should I tell you? I speak if I want to, and if I don't want to, I won't. That's my right." The courtroom descended into chaos. Gasps, muttered curses, and even cries of outrage echoed through the benches. Spectators were furious. Even Zhang's own lawyer had to signal him to quiet down. Collecting himself, the lawyer finally addressed the court. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice firm, "my client's mother acted out of love for her son. Seeing him injured, she transformed in an instant into a force capable of overpowering Lou. Anything can happen in this world. Human potential is limitless." The jury members exchanged incredulous glances. Many felt a surge of frustration, struggling to reconcile the audacity of the argument with the brutal facts of the case. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Silence. We must rely on evidence, not conjecture." The prosecutor rose, determined to cut through the confusion. "If you want evidence," he said firmly, producing the forensic report, "then here it is." Lu Guan had 19 defensive wounds on her, arms, showing she was still alive when struck. There are over 30 knife wounds on her head, all cut from top to bottom. This indicates that the attacker was taller and physically stronger than the victim does. Zhang's mother fit these characteristics. The defense lawyer paled. Unable to respond, the prosecutor continued, pointing directly at Zhang. You had a relationship with Louis, not love. Then friendship, yet you killed her and dismembered her body afterward. You showed no remorse. You intentionally attempted to mislead the police, framing others over 10 years ago. You left your homeland and, for the sake of permanent residency, fabricated lies after your mother's death. You blamed her for your own actions, reversing right and wrong. You stand here today inhuman, unjust, disloyal, and unfilial land. You have the audacity to speak. Nonsense. The prosecutor's voice rang with finality. Your Honor, I propose that Zhang Chuan be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Applause erupted in the courtroom. But Canada is a nation ruled by law. Convicting someone of first-degree murder was not simple. The murder weapon had yet to be recovered, and no direct evidence tied Zhang to the act itself. Without a confession or the weapon, first-degree murder would be almost impossible to prove. Faced with the complexity of the case, the judge adjourned the trial for 3 days. When the jury returned with their verdict, they concluded that Zhang's actions in dismembering and disposing of Lu's body were premeditated based on the evidence. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the first 18 years. The case of Zhang Chuan is more than a simple criminal tale. It is a stark portrait of moral decay, betrayal, and the complexity of human relationships in modern society. For Toronto, the story served as a chilling reminder. When people lose their humanity, the consequences can be devastating even in the most extreme circumstances. The case underscored the importance of conscience, morality, and the boundaries that separate justice from chaos. Story 2. The Rise and Fall of Andrea Nicole MacDonald. While the first case shocked Toronto, our next story takes us to San Antonio, a tale that captivated and horrified America in 2019. At its center was Andrea Nicole MacDonald, a Jamaican woman whose life was a testament to ambition, determination, and ultimately tragedy. Born on September 23, 1989, in Port Antonio, Jamaica, Andrea grew up in a working-class family, marked by poverty and deprivation. Meals were modest, comforts scarce, yet even in these challenging circumstances, a spark of ambition ignited within her from an early age. She dreamed of moving to America, building a fortune, and transforming her destiny. Andrea was exceptional academically at school. She consistently excelled, demonstrating a sharp intellect and relentless drive. Her ambition was matched by her work ethic. She took on odd jobs, excelled in community projects, and never allowed setbacks to deter her. She was determined to rise above her circumstances, and her efforts eventually bore fruit. By her early 20s, Andrea had successfully migrated to the United States and, through talent, determination, and an unyielding vision, had amassed considerable wealth. She quickly became one of the most admired young millionaires, a symbol of success in a land of opportunity. But, as often happens, extraordinary ambition can attract both admiration and envy, and Andrea's story would soon take a dark turn. Her rise to success was accompanied by perilous relationships, high-stakes business deals, and rivalries that would ultimately culminate in tragedy. Her life serves as a reminder that the pursuit of success, while inspiring, is not without its dangers. The same determination that propels a person to greatness can, when combined with human jealousy, betrayal, or obsession, place them directly in harm's way. From her earliest days in Port Antonio, Jamaica, Andrea Nicole MacDonald exhibited extraordinary promise, even in a childhood shaped by modest means and frequent deprivation. She displayed a keen intellect and a magnetic personality that drew people toward her. By the time she completed her primary and secondary education, it was clear that she was not just academically gifted, but socially adept. with a natural ability to inspire and lead. After graduating from high school, Andrea pursued a marketing degree in Jamaica, demonstrating a relentless commitment to her studies. But she had her sights set far beyond the island. Her dreams were anchored in America, a land she believed could offer both opportunity and prosperity. Motivated by ambition and unwavering determination, she enrolled in an MBA program at the University of Texas at San Antonio, a step that would prove pivotal in the trajectory of her life. It is often said that opportunity comes to those who never stop striving, and Andrea's life exemplified this truth during her time in San Antonio. She not only excelled academically, but also cultivated an extensive network, developing strong professional relationships and further refining her natural charm and eloquence. But fate, in its mysterious way, was about to intervene in a manner that would change her life forever. During a brief visit back to Port Antonio, Andrea experienced a serendipitous encounter that would alter the course of her destiny. She met Andre MacDonald, a man whose path had been shaped by ambition, discipline, and an unusual combination of intellect and resilience. Like Andrea, Andre was born in Jamaica, though he had relocated to the United States at a young age after his mother remarried an American man. Initially, he pursued a degree in electrical engineering at Florida International University, but his burgeoning interest in information technology soon redirected his focus. Andre immersed himself in the field, dedicating countless hours to mastering the emerging technologies of the early 2000s. His expertise eventually earned him recognition as a skilled computer professional, but the allure of a more structured and disciplined career beckoned. In 2004, he made a decisive move. He joined the United States Air Force, committing himself to a path that combined service, stability, and opportunity. From that moment, Andre's career was marked by continuous accomplishments, each achievement building upon the last. Their fateful meeting occurred in May 2009, during a family funeral in Port Antonio. Though Andrea was 10 years younger, the age difference mattered little in the face of their undeniable connection. Andrea, a brilliant and composed student, and Andre, a disciplined Air Force officer, found themselves drawn together almost instantly. Their relationship blossomed with remarkable speed, and before long, they were engaged, preparing to begin a life together in San Antonio, where Andre was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base. The stability offered by a husband with a military career. Andrea's ambitions remained undimmed. She was determined not to settle into the role of a traditional housewife. Business success was not merely a fleeting desire, it was the culmination of years of planning, study, and vision. She saw potential in the emerging market of elderly care, identifying it as both a practical necessity and a golden opportunity for growth. In a twist of fortuitous timing, Andre's grandmother had recently undergone a leg amputation, requiring specialized care. The coincidence seemed almost providential. Andrea's proposed business model, designed to meet a pressing social need, intersected perfectly with her own family's requirements. With her husband's unwavering support, they pooled their resources to bring the vision to life. Andre even went so far as to sell a cherished vehicle and take out a substantial loan to fund the venture. At just 22 years old, Andre launched Starlight H's assisted living. From the outset, she poured her energy, intellect, and heart into the business. Her meticulous attention to detail, combined with an innate ability to connect with clients and families, quickly earned her a reputation for excellence. Under her guidance, Starlight H's became synonymous with quality care, professionalism, and trust. Within 2 years, the facility had expanded significantly, and Andre assumed full operational control, while Andre, bound by military obligations, transitioned to a hands-off role, as owner profits were shared equitably, reflecting both his financial investment and her operational leadership. As their business flourished, so too did their personal life. They acquired 2 homes, a $450,000 property in Forest Park, and a luxurious mansion in Stone Oak, an upscale district of northern San Antonio. Their prosperity seemed complete in 2015. The family welcomed their daughter Alina, Her arrival brought joy and vitality, filling their home with the laughter and warmth that only a child can provide. Andri balanced her responsibilities as a mother, wife, and business leader with remarkable grace in the eyes of friends and colleagues. She was the embodiment of success, a devoted spouse, a nurturing parent, and an entrepreneur whose vision and drive set her apart from her peers. By 2019, Starlight H's had grown into a formidable enterprise. With multiple branches and a steadily increasing revenue stream, Andri had achieved millionaire status at the age of 29. Her accomplishments were widely recognized. She was celebrated in the media for her entrepreneurial prowess, admired by her family for her dedication, and respected by peers for her unwavering professionalism. Her future seemed limitless, yet life, as often is the case, is full of unforeseen turns. Andri's relentless pursuit of success came with its own pressures. Her days began at 5:30 a.m., dedicated to physical fitness, and continued with rigorous oversight of her business operations. By 8 a.m. each day was a meticulous choreography of work, family, and personal development. Her discipline had become both a source of strength and a potential vulnerability, leaving little room for unpredictability or disruption. Then, on March 1st, 2019, a rupture occurred in the carefully ordered rhythm of her life. Andri, known for her punctuality and dedication, did not arrive at work as expected. Her absence was immediately noticeable, and her phone went unanswered for the first time in years. Friends, employees, and loved ones were confronted with uncertainty, and a sense of foreboding began to creep. In the morning of March 1st, 2019, began like any other in the McDonald household, or so it seemed, but quickly, what should have been a routine day spiraled into unease, confusion, and growing alarm. Andri Nicole McDonald, known for her remarkable punctuality and disciplined routines, failed to appear at work. This was uncharacteristic, and her absence immediately raised questions. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Attempts to reach her through email or text yielded nothing. Even her fitness trainer, who had been accustomed to her unwavering commitment to a 5:30 a.m. workout, reported that she had not arrived for her session. Of first in years concern grew among her staff, who knew Andri not just as a boss, but as a disciplined, dependable leader. Her absence was troubling, but the lack of any explanation raised a red flag. The employees, worried for both her safety and that of her family, decided to take the unusual step of reaching out to her closest friend, Carol. Carol and Andri shared not only a personal friendship, but also a routine of morning workouts and coffee dates, moments of normalcy that had forged a deep bond between them. Carol, however, was just as mystified as the staff. She had heard nothing from Andri and had no idea where she could be. With worry escalating, Carol decided to investigate personally, accompanied by one of Andri's employees. She drove to the McDonald residence, knocking repeatedly at the door. She was met with silence. The quiet was eerie, almost unnatural. Yet, when Carol tried the back door, she discovered it unlocked. Something inside compelled her to enter. Upon stepping in, the scene she encountered immediately triggered alarm. The family dog was visibly distressed, roaming the house in search of food and leaving waste in its wake. This neglect suggested that the household had been abandoned for several days, a detail incongruent with Andri's meticulous nature. Yet, the most unsettling discovery awaited in the bathroom. Carol noticed what appeared to be dried blood and strands of hair stuck to the light switch. Her heart pounded as the implications crystallized. This was no ordinary absence. Overwhelmed with unease, Carol retreated from the house and immediately contacted a police friend for guidance. Acting on his advice, she reached out to Andri's mother, Moran McDonald, requesting that she come to the residence to report her daughter officially missing. This step would ensure that law enforcement became formally involved, enabling an investigation to begin. When Moran arrived and saw the bloodstains for herself, the sight shattered her heart instantly. She called the police within minutes. Officers were on the scene, beginning a methodical examination of the residence. Their initial assessment revealed three concerning observations. First, Andrea was conspicuously absent, yet her car, wallet, and keys were all still inside the home. Second, the dried blood and hair adhered to the bathroom light switch, suggestive of a violent encounter. Third, in the backyard, police discovered a pile of ashes, with a zipper head protruding, evidence that some clothing or fabric had been burned. Morin confirmed the zipper belonged to her daughter's clothing, deepening the suspicion that foul play was involved amid the rising tension. Andre MacDonald returned home initially cheerful. He announced that he had located Andre at a hospital on Highway 281, reasoning that her known history of migraines might explain her absence. The news briefly eased everyone's anxiety. It seemed that perhaps the chaos was a misunderstanding. Nevertheless, prudence dictated verification. When police and family arrived at the hospital, they were shocked to discover that Andre was not there. The person Andre had found, whom he assumed was his wife, was merely a patient with the same name. Andre, now visibly anxious, immediately cooperated with law enforcement, recounting the events of the previous evening. According to Andre, the night before had been marked by a disagreement between him and his wife, resulting in them sleeping in separate rooms in the morning. Believing she was still asleep, he took their daughter Alina to school before attending to his duties at the Air Force Base. Andre admitted that the argument stemmed from a financial and professional dispute, while the business they ran together was intended to be a joint venture. He had discovered that Andre had secretly opened another branch under her name alone. Feeling betrayed, he confronted her, and their exchange escalated into anger and tension. Andre's account seemed consistent with surveillance footage and other verifiable timelines. Video from a gas station corroborated his movements, showing him stopping to refuel before returning home late at night. From a procedural standpoint, there was no immediate cause for suspicion regarding him yet. The absence of Andre, combined with the blood evidence and disrupted household, left police facing a troubling puzzle. They began a comprehensive investigation, which included interviews with colleagues, friends, and close associates. During these interviews, a critical revelation surfaced. A friend disclosed that Andre had a past relationship with a Jamaican man named Owen Hall. Though the affair predated her marriage to Andre, it had recently reignited in secret. The two shared a history in Port Antonio, and while their romantic connection had been paused, lingering affection persisted. In 2017, during a charity event, Andre and Owen crossed paths, once again torn between the familiarity of first love and the stability of her marriage. Andre chose to discreetly rekindle the affair. Evidence of the clandestine relationship soon became visible in a more permanent form. Andre had tattooed an artistic A on her hand, along with the numbers March 14, 76 on her wrist, a reference to Owen's birthday. These markings, unnoticed by her husband initially, eventually raised suspicions. Andre, guided by an instinctive unease, began to examine her social media presence and circle of friends. He discovered photos linking her to Orna, and noted that he bore an identical tattoo, confirming the connection. Realizing the significance of the numbers, Andre understood that the tattoos symbolized an intimate bond with her former lover. Confronted with the possibility of betrayal, Andre's response was calculated rather than acting impulsively. He first expressed anger and considered divorce. However, he subsequently transitioned to a more subtle strategy. Negotiating emotionally, he demanded that Andre remove the tattoos, sever contact with Owen, and refrain from traveling to Jamaica alone. By presenting the ultimatum in a mix of emotional appeal and practical boundaries, he sought to regain control without inciting public scandal or confrontation. Yet by the morning of March 1st, Andre had disappeared entirely. The previous evening's dispute and her secretive actions now framed a context of mounting tension. Police faced the dual challenge of determining whether her absence was voluntary, a result of personal choice, or whether foul play was involved. The discovery of blood in the house, the evidence of burned clothing, and the sudden silence from a usually disciplined, methodical woman escalated the urgency. The case had evolved from a simple missing person investigation into a scenario fraught with the potential for tragedy. forcing law enforcement to deploy all available resources to unravel the truth. Recognizing the severity of her mistake and reflecting on the years they had invested in building their family, Andre Nicole MacDonald reluctantly agreed to her husband Andre's conditions. She understood the stakes not just for their marriage, but for the stability of their daughter Alina and the life they had painstakingly constructed. In those days following their reconciliation, the MacDonalds returned to what appeared to be the comforting rhythm of their prior lives. They laughed together, shared meals, and attended to daily routines as a harmonious family. Outsiders, friends, colleagues, and relatives saw a seemingly perfect couple, their interactions radiating warmth and stability. They seemed the epitome of marital bliss, appearing united just 13 days before Andre's 40th birthday. When the couple's close friends gathered for a celebratory party, but appearances, as often is the case, were deceptive. A broken mirror may reflect an image, but the cracks are permanent, forever distorting the original reflection. So too with human hearts, scarred by betrayal and mistrust. Police investigators, attuned to the subtleties of human behavior and the faintest traces of deception, sensed that the narrative presented by the MacDonalds did not fully align with the evidence. Carefully reviewing Andre's phone, detectives discovered text messages that revealed underlying tensions that had not been disclosed previously. One message, sent the evening before Andre's disappearance, read, "If you mention Owen again, I'll divorce you." The reply was blunt, "I don't care about divorce. You were the first to bring Owen into our lives." These words exposed cracks far deeper than financial disagreements or minor arguments beneath the surface. There existed a storm of emotional conflict, jealousy, and unresolved resentment. Andre and Andre's relationship was far from harmonious. The revelation that Andre had omitted these details from earlier statements raised red flags, prompting investigators to suspect that he might be hiding more than he had admitted. As police pursued this line of inquiry, Andre's behavior became increasingly erratic. Surveillance at the MacDonald residence monitored his every move around the clock, to the officers' surprise. The very next morning, Andre visited a local gun store, apparently intending to purchase a handgun along with ammunition. This action immediately escalated suspicions. Whether motivated by self-defense, panic, or premeditation, the purchase suggested a potential plan to inflict harm or to cover it up. Unbeknownst to him, undercover police were already observing the transaction. Confronted with the realization that he had been discovered, Andre abandoned the purchase, leaving the store hastily. This breach of cover prompted police to act decisively. He was apprehended and temporarily handed over to the Air Force for a psychological evaluation to determine if he posed an immediate risk to himself or others. Meanwhile, law enforcement secured a new search warrant to conduct a second, more thorough examination of the MacDonald estate. This time, investigators discovered a series of anomalies that deepened the case's complexity. First, the garage door intact during the initial search showed clear signs of tampering. Something had occurred between the first and second searches, hinting at the removal or manipulation of evidence. In Andre's vehicle, authorities found items suggestive of premeditation: a shovel, an axe, 2 gasoline cans, a flashlight, and gloves. Each item appeared freshly purchased, pointing toward potential involvement in a cover-up or a violent act. For Moran MacDonald, the news of her son's arrest felt like a thunderbolt, a seismic shock that shattered her perception of reality. Tearfully, she insisted he was incapable of harming his wife. They were a happy couple, she said, trembling. How could my son ever do such a thing? Her anguish reflected both maternal instinct and disbelief, emotions all too common in cases where loved ones are accused of heinous crimes. On March 5th, Andre MacDonald's trial commenced at the Bexar County Court. Initially, he faced charges related solely to the destruction of evidence, including deliberate concealment of store receipts and deletion of messages that could illuminate the sequence of events surrounding Andre's disappearance. In court, Andre vehemently denied any wrongdoing. He argued that the gun purchase had been intended strictly for self-defense, and insisted on his enduring love for his wife. He maintained that he would never, under any circumstances, harm Andreth. Absence of Andrei's body and lack of definitive evidence allowed Andre to post bail after paying $300,000 on March 27th, while the legal proceedings unfolded. The search for Andrei intensified public concern, already heightened by media coverage, escalated into large-scale mobilization. Volunteers, friends, and family combed the area surrounding San Antonio, joined by 200 Air Force service members and a substantial contingent of local police. Yet, despite the exhaustive efforts, Andrei seemed to have vanished entirely like dust, dissipating in the wind. In the 8th day following her disappearance, the community held a candlelight vigil. Flickering lights and whispered prayers conveyed hope and desperation. Friends and family pleaded silently for Andre to reveal the truth, but all they received was an ominous silence. Weeks passed without meaningful leads. Frustrated by the deadlock, Bexar County authorities sought assistance from the state of Texas and offered a $5,000 reward for information that could reveal Andrei's whereabouts. The FBI, recognizing the national significance of the case, also joined the investigation. Agent Michelle, a senior operative, emphasized the importance of persistence. "We will not abandon this search. We will continue until we know what happened to Andrei." Months of relentless investigation yielded no immediate results. Then, on July 11, 2019, hope and horror collided. A volunteer named Clifton discovered a human skull on a ranch approximately 6 miles from the McDonald residence. The remains were deliberately camouflaged among cattle bones, suggesting an effort to obscure the crime. Police quickly secured the site and began a meticulous forensic examination. 2 days later, the fragments were confirmed to belong to Andrei McDonald, finally providing a tragic resolution to the months-long search. Discovery immediately led to Andrei McDonald's arrest on charges of murder. Forensic analysis of the skeletal remains revealed devastating trauma, multiple fractures to the spine and ribs, severe damage to the jawbone, and evidence of extreme violence. The precise cause of death remained indeterminable due to the body's destruction, leaving only Andre with knowledge of the full truth. During initial interrogations, investigators confronted him with these horrifying findings, pressing for answers that would finally explain the chain of events leading to Andrei's murder. As investigators delved deeper into the tragic story of Andrei Nicole McDonald, it became clear that the public image of a happy, successful couple was far removed from the reality of her life with Andrei McDonald. Despite appearances, their marriage had been fracturing long before her disappearance. Confidential documents, text messages, and witness statements painted a picture of a relationship fraught with conflict, resentment, and emotional turmoil. Andrei's own admissions during questioning revealed a pattern of discord, including a divorce petition he had filed in February 2017, only to abruptly withdraw. The reasons for this reversal were complex, rooted in both financial disputes and unresolved personal grievances. During his initial court testimonies, Andrei tried to frame the discord as minor misunderstandings and financial disagreements. He recounted that in August 2016, he had been transferred to Clare Air Force Base in Mississippi for a 6-month training course. At that time, he claimed, the couple's relationship was still functional and without significant issues yet. During a break from training, he received an unexpected message from Andrei expressing a desire for divorce. He initially believed it to be a joke, a misunderstanding born from miscommunication or stress, but by early December, upon returning home, he was confronted with a chilling reality. Andrei's demeanor had drastically changed. She was cold, distant, and emotionally unapproachable, a stark contrast to the woman he had married. Andrei described this period as the beginning of a downward spiral in their relationship. He explained that he filed for divorce because he could no longer tolerate the emotional distance and disagreements, but he ultimately withdrew the petition due to the complexity of dividing assets and managing their shared business interests. As for allegations of domestic violence, He consistently denied them, insisting that Andre's daily fitness routine and remarkable physical strength, capable of lifting 270 pounds, made it impossible for him to have inflicted harm upon her in the past, despite his claims. The questioning slowly revealed the true depth of tension within the household. Andre reluctantly admitted that their marriage had been fraught with arguments, mistrust, and hidden resentments, though he repeatedly insisted that he had no part in his wife's death. Each time the topic turned to Andre's murder, he grew silent, refusing to provide further detail. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020 prolonged the judicial process, delaying hearings, forensic analyses, and witness testimonies. As a result, the trial dragged on for nearly 4 years. During this period, Andre was placed under house arrest in April 2021, awaiting final judgment. The lengthy trial, complicated by the absence of the victim's body and the intricacy of financial and forensic evidence, created a tense atmosphere for all involved. Then, in January 2023, a startling development occurred. Just 3 days before the scheduled hearing, Andre MacDonald broke his silence. He confided in his mother, confessing that he had caused his wife's death later that day. In a 41-minute phone call to Andre's mother and sister, he tearfully disclosed the harrowing truth. According to his account, the fatal events unfolded after a heated argument in their home. Andre described returning home from a nearby gas station, not to find peace, but to face conflict. He recounted that he suggested divorce and the division of assets, triggering an intense argument with Andre. Emotions flared, insults were exchanged, and in the heat of the moment, Andre allegedly spat at him and attempted to strike him. Feeling threatened and recalling her extraordinary physical strength, Andre claimed he acted out of fear for his own safety. He admitted to headbutting Andre and scratching her face. In a moment of panic, she retreated to the bathroom, enraged and defiant. According to Andre, he then attempted to neutralize the perceived threat by striking Andre's legs, causing her to fall, despite his intent to avoid harming her fatally. He described a sequence of actions that ultimately resulted in her lying motionless on the bathroom floor, fearing that their young daughter, Alina, would witness the violence. Andre carried her to her room and soothed her to sleep. When he returned to the bathroom approximately 30 minutes later, he discovered that Andre had stopped breathing. Andre framed the sequence as accidental, emphasizing that he had no intention to kill her. He insisted that his actions were defensive, reactive to a sudden threat, and influenced by the couple's long-standing emotional conflicts. He reiterated this narrative during initial questioning, asserting that he was overwhelmed, fearful, and acting instinctively to protect himself. On January 20th, 2023, the trial officially commenced. Andre's testimony remained consistent with his earlier statements. He recounted the events of the fatal evening with careful precision. Yet the inconsistencies and violence inherent in his account raised alarm among jurors and investigators alike. The judge, seeking clarity, pressed him on critical points. When you realized Andre had stopped breathing, why didn't you call 911? The judge asked, her tone a mix of incredulity and urgency. Andre responded chillingly, claiming that calling emergency services would not have saved her. He insisted that his sole focus was preventing their daughter from witnessing trauma, stating, "I just wanted my wife to quickly disappear from the house." He admitted to transporting her body to a nearby ranch, placing her beside a dead cow, removing her clothing, and subsequently burning the garments in the backyard. The court demanded an explanation for the multiple fractures and trauma discovered in Andre's skeletal remains. Andre acknowledged the injuries, but framed them as an extension of his defensive panic. He confessed that after the fire had extinguished, he struck her face and neck repeatedly with a hammer, driven by anger at the betrayal and perceived asset disputes. He repeatedly claimed that his actions were justified by a combination of fear, outrage, and perceived self-defense, pointing to her physical fitness and prior athleticism as evidence that she posed a credible threat. He even presented a video demonstrating Andre's strength, attempting to contextualize his reaction as irrational. if extreme, response. The trial was exhaustive over 6 days. The court heard from 33 witnesses, including friends, neighbors, law enforcement officials, and forensic experts. Testimonies detailed both the couple's marital tensions and the calculated post-mortem concealment of evidence. Financial records revealed the suspicious transfer of funds from joint accounts, while forensic analysts highlighted the deliberate destruction of physical evidence despite the overwhelming testimony. The jury found itself divided. Some members were persuaded by Andre's confession and the brutality of his posthumous actions, emphasizing his desecration of the body, transfer of assets, and lack of remorse. Others were sympathetic to his claims of accidental death, noting his lack of prior criminal record, military discipline, and assertion of fear-driven Deliberations were long and contentious, with jurors debating the fine line between intentional murder and manslaughter. After nearly 11 hours of discussion, a verdict was finally reached. Andre MacDonald was convicted of manslaughter, receiving a maximum prison sentence of 20 years. Additionally, the court imposed a 5-year sentence for evidence tampering, resulting in a total of 25 years of incarceration. Andre attempted to appeal the verdict, but all appeals were rejected, affirming the court's judgment beyond the criminal trial. Civil proceedings further cemented his accountability. Andre was ordered to pay $110 million in compensatory damages and $100 million in punitive damages. Of these sums, at least $60 million was earmarked for his daughter Alina, ensuring some measure of financial security despite the tragic loss of her mother. The Andre MacDonald case remains one of the most harrowing accounts of domestic conflict, betrayal, and violence in modern American true crime history. It serves as a cautionary tale of how unresolved marital tensions, infidelity, and emotional suppression can escalate into irreversible tragedy beyond the legal verdicts and financial judgments. The case highlights the human consequences of deception, impulsivity, and the fragile balance of trust within intimate relationships. Andre Nicole MacDonald's life, once marked by ambition, success, and generosity, was cruelly cut short, leaving a void that no sentence, restitution, or legal proceeding could truly fill. Through exhaustive investigation, relentless forensic analysis, and painstaking courtroom deliberations, justice was served. But it was a justice steeped in sorrow. The story of Andre and Andre MacDonald underscores the importance of vigilance, communication, and accountability in intimate relationships. It also exemplifies how even the most seemingly ideal lives can harbor hidden darkness, which, if unaddressed, may culminate in irreversible tragedy. The aftermath of Andre MacDonald's trial left deep scars on everyone connected to the case, particularly his young daughter, Alina. While the court's verdict brought legal closure, it could not heal the fractured lives left behind in the courtroom. Andre's mother and sister expressed their outrage, questioning how he could have resorted to murder rather than simply pursuing a divorce. Their anger reflected the broader disappointment of prosecutors and the public, many of whom viewed the sentence as alarmingly lenient to them. Andre had displayed clear motives, callousness, and a disturbing lack of remorse. The brutal methods he employed, using both a hammer and fire to destroy evidence, underscored his ruthlessness. Despite this, he avoided the life sentence that many believed he deserved, leaving a lingering sense of injustice. The most tragic victim in this ordeal, however, was undeniably Alina, diagnosed with severe autism at the age of 4. She had limited verbal communication skills and relied heavily on routine and stability. The traumatic loss of her mother compounded her challenges, leaving her with post-traumatic stress disorder. For a child so young and vulnerable, the psychological impact was devastating, casting a long shadow over her formative years. The court recognized the need to safeguard her future, and in light of Andre's previous transfers of family funds, the prosecution requested the establishment of a trust fund to secure her inheritance and ensure her financial stability when she came of age, though this provided some reassurance. It could not restore the emotional and psychological loss she endured. The MacDonald case concluded, but society's gaze quickly turned to another shocking tragedy, this time in Hong Kong, where the brutal murder of Abby Choi gripped the city's attention on February 24, 2023. Police discovered Choi's body inside a residence in Liang Matson Village. Tai Po. The crime scene was horrifying, marked by grotesque methods of body disposal. Witnesses described a scene so gruesome that many reported feeling physically ill upon seeing it. Choi's body had been dismembered, and fragments were stored in a refrigerator, while other parts were boiled in water, a level of calculated brutality that shocked not only local communities, but also the international media. Outlets such as the BBC and CNN extensively covered the case, highlighting the shocking nature of the crime and the complex background of the victim. Conflicting reports quickly surfaced, complicating the narrative. Some sources suggested the motive behind the murder was financial, stemming from disputes over property ownership. Others implied that romantic entanglements played a role, involving alleged affairs between Choi's former and current partners, some suggesting a same-sex relationship, while speculation abounded. The exact circumstances of her death remained shrouded in mystery, drawing investigators and the public into a labyrinth of motives, betrayal, and human complexity. Abby Choi was born on July 15, 1994. In Hong Kong, her mother Chung In-fa hailed from a modest background in a rural village and had experienced her own share of hardships initially. Fa married and settled in Haikou City, Heian, China. The couple eventually moved to Hong Kong, where Choi was born, despite early promises of a stable life. Tragedy soon followed. Choi's biological father developed a gambling addiction, leading to the dissolution of the marriage. Fa later remarried a local restaurant owner, who became Choi's stepfather. Choi developed a warm and loving relationship with her stepfather and two half-sisters, and her childhood was largely marked by familial support and encouragement. Choi's mother and stepfather pursued economic development and investment opportunities, gradually establishing a prosperous foothold in Heian. Initially dealing in titanium metals, they later expanded into infrastructure projects, amassing significant wealth over the years. Fa even cultivated a social media presence to document her daily life, earning a reputation among locals as a kind-hearted, generous figure who valued compassion and integrity. She instilled these values in Choi, who learned from an early age to treat others with respect and empathy. 15. Choi met Alex Kwong, a peer from a comparatively modest background. Despite differences in social status, Choi was drawn to Alex for his personality and sincerity. Their bond deepened over time, culminating in marriage when Choi turned 18. In 2012, the couple soon welcomed two children, a son and a daughter, and Choi simultaneously began cultivating her Instagram account. Her platform quickly gained traction as she showcased luxury handbags and jewelry, attracting a substantial following and marking the beginning of her public persona in Hong Kong's fashion and lifestyle circles. In contrast, Alex's life was fraught with instability. Between 2013 and 2015, he engaged in a series of criminal activities, including the theft of 39 necklaces, 32 bracelets, and significant quantities of gold in the Outsong district of Hong Kong. These actions resulted in 7 formal theft charges by early 2015. Alex had escalated his criminal activity, exploiting a gay dating app to scam acquaintances under the pretense of reselling precious metals at high returns over time. He defrauded 4 close male friends of nearly 5 million yuan, approximately $73,000 USD. Law enforcement eventually arrested him in February 2015 at Wower Garden, where he lived with Choi. He was released on bail, but remained a fugitive, eluding authorities through repeated travel between mainland China and Hong Kong. Confronted with the reality of Alex's criminality, Choi sought to rebuild her life. She divorced Alex and secured custody of their children, who were placed with his family, allowing Choi to start anew. Her focus shifted to her career and personal growth. leading her to marry Chris Tam Fong Chen, the son of the owner of Tam Ji Noodle, a widely recognized restaurant chain in Hong Kong with a 27-year history and hundreds of branches. Their wedding, held on December 9, 2016, was a grand affair, though notably, the marriage was never officially registered. Despite the lack of formal registration, the union signified a fresh start for Choi, who now enjoyed financial stability, social prestige, and a renewed sense of purpose. Interestingly, both Choi and Chris maintained separate control over their respective assets. Choi continued to pursue personal investment opportunities, acquiring a high-rise apartment in Manhattan Hill in 2018. This property, valued at approximately 45 million Hong Kong dollars, demonstrated her continued business acumen and her ability to safeguard her wealth independently, further establishing her as a respected figure in Hong Kong's social and economic spheres. Despite these accomplishments, Choi's life was not without challenges. The complexities of her previous marriage, combined with her ex-husband's criminal background, meant that she constantly had to navigate legal and financial hurdles. Moreover, her new marriage, while socially advantageous, introduced new layers of interpersonal and financial complexity, unbeknownst to her. These entanglements would ultimately intersect in the most tragic and violent manner imaginable. By the time of her death, Choi had become a symbol of resilience and determination. Her personal brand, cultivated through social media, business endeavors, and public appearances, reflected a life built on perseverance, independence, and ambition. Yet, these very attributes, her wealth, influence, and ability to assert independence, may have made her a target in a world where jealousy, greed, and betrayal can intersect with lethal consequences. The discovery of her body in Liang Matson village, Taipo, forced authorities to confront a case that was as much about social status and wealth as it was about personal relationships. Investigators noted that the use of extreme methods, dismemberment, boiling, and refrigerated storage, indicated a perpetrator who was not only calculating but also intent on erasing evidence and potentially masking identity. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves across Hong Kong's entertainment and fashion communities, leaving peers, followers, and family members in a state of disbelief and horror. The investigation unfolded. Questions surrounding Choi's former husband Alex Kwong resurfaced. While initially dismissed as a potential suspect due to his long-standing fugitive status, investigators revisited the timeline of his interactions with Choi and assessed whether residual conflicts from their past relationship may have contributed to the events leading to her death. Simultaneously, attention shifted to her current spouse, Chris Tam Fong Chen, and the dynamics of their newly merged family's disputes over property, wealth, and social influence became focal points in understanding possible motives. The international media coverage highlighted the global implications of the case. BBC and CNN's reporting emphasized both the shocking nature of the crime and the broader societal context, exploring how wealth, social mobility, and family dynamics intersect with extreme acts of violence. Public discourse oscillated between sympathy for Choi, outrage at the perpetrators, and speculation about the complex web of relationships that ultimately led to her untimely death. Authorities continued their work. The investigation revealed a deeper pattern. Choi's murder was not an isolated incident of random violence, but rather the culmination of a series of personal, financial, and emotional conflicts that had escalated over years. Her story illustrated how unresolved disputes, compounded by the pressures of public life, can create dangerous vulnerabilities. In particular, the juxtaposition of Choi's calculated independence and the instability of those around her painted a portrait of a woman navigating perilous waters, ultimately falling victim to circumstances beyond her control, despite not having officially registered their marriage. Abby Choi and Chris Tam Fong Chen's life together appeared remarkably harmonious to the outside world. They were devoted to their children, blending the family seamlessly, and Choi's two children from her previous marriage, quickly grew attached to Chris, who treated them with the care and attention of a loving stepfather. Choi's mother, Chung-in Fa, often shared glimpses of this harmonious family life on social media. Her posts, adorned with family photos, described Chris as incredibly filial and praised the couple's mutual understanding and support. She wrote about endless conversations, shared laughter, and a deep appreciation for life's journey together, leaving little doubt that she cherished her son-in-law as though he were her own blood. Chris, for his part, demonstrated unwavering support for Choi and her children. When the family traveled, they were always accompanied by all 4 children, emphasizing their commitment to unity and shared experiences. Choi's new in-laws echoed this sentiment, celebrating her as a kind-hearted and invaluable addition to the family. Despite the lack of a blood connection, it was evident that, at least outwardly, Choi had successfully integrated into her new life, building not just personal happiness, but also a stable household professionally. Choi's career began to flourish with renewed vigor, with family support and increased visibility. She frequently attended high-profile fashion events and mingled with influential figures. By late January 2023, her professional star was rising. She participated in Paris Fashion Week, and on February 15th, just 8 days before her tragic death, she appeared on the cover of a Paris fashion newsletter. Hailed as one of the most promising rising stars in the global fashion scene, in stark contrast, her ex-husband, Alex Kwong, lived a life marked by lawlessness and indulgence. Despite the years that had passed since their divorce, he seemed unable to let go of the financial and social advantages he once enjoyed through Choi. Even after their separation, Choi had maintained a remarkable degree of generosity toward Alex and his family. Reports from Chinese media indicated that she continued to provide financial support, honoring commitments made during their divorce period. She had promised to care for Alex's family, even as he faced repeated business failures, and she consistently kept her word without public complaint or resentment. According to reports from ACOM, while Alex's family formally cared for the children, Choi remained the one covering the majority of expenses, hiring domestic staff and drivers to ensure the children were well looked after. Meanwhile, Alex's family allegedly exploited this arrangement, using the children as a pretext to request money, which they squandered frivolously. Alex himself remained a fugitive for years, frequently presenting himself as a wealthy man while traveling between mainland China and Hong Kong. He was known for lavish spending, often splurging hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong dollars in a single night at clubs and bars. Yet, despite these transgressions, Choi showed remarkable patience and continued to support her children and family financially. In 2018, Choi co-founded Ping Lady Limited, a company where she and Anthony Kwong, Alex's brother, both served as directors. Later, in 2021, she invested in Bear Snack, another venture where she also shared the directorship with Anthony's. Social media posts from Anthony hinted at close ties between them, using captions such as bro and sis love, giving the appearance of a supportive, cooperative relationship. This public display, however, belied the underlying tension simmering with Alex's family, who maintained interactions with Choi's new in-laws in ways that outsiders might have found perplexing. Friends noted the unusual dynamics between the families. A close friend of Choi revealed that during a period when Chris was recovering from a leg injury, Alex would frequently invite him to casinos and even accompany him to rehab facilities, pressuring him to join in indulgences that Chris ethically declined. Choi, aware of these interactions, often chose to act as though nothing untoward was occurring, attempting to maintain outward harmony for the sake of her children and her blended family. In January 2023, a seemingly ordinary event underscored the complexity of these relationships. Choi orchestrated a temple visit that included members from both her ex-husband's and current husband's families. A group photo was taken, capturing the two family units together in a rare moment of apparent unity for outsiders. This carefully managed cordiality between families, with a fraught history, might have seemed almost surreal to Choi. As financial decisions added another layer of complexity to her life in 2019. She purchased a luxurious residence at Kadoorie Hill in Kowloon, Hong Kong, for 72 million HKD. Intriguingly, she registered the property under the name of her ex-father. Quanka media speculation suggested that this arrangement may have been motivated by tax considerations. By purchasing the property under a first-time buyer's name, Choi potentially saved 7 million HKD in taxes, as she already owned another property at Manhattan Hill in 2020. Alex's family moved into the Kadoorie Hill property, posting. Photos of a hot pot meal on social media captioned "first meal in the new home," underscoring their sense of entitlement and ownership. This residence, intended as a strategic asset in Choi's financial planning, would later become a grim point of connection to her tragic fate. By 2022, Choi planned to sell the Kadoorie Hill property, intending to allocate part of the proceeds toward her children's education and using the remainder to purchase a new home. For Alex's family, given that the house was legally registered under Kwang Sirka's name, Choi needed to provide clear evidence that she had fully funded its purchase, ensuring that the sale and allocation of funds would remain under her control. In January 2023, she listed the property for 77 million HKD. Real estate agents frequently brought prospective buyers to view the mansion, a process that visibly agitated Kwang Ka, who expressed repeated opposition. He insisted that, as the legal owner, the property should belong to him and went so far as to threaten Choi if she attempted to sell. Despite these threats, Choi resolutely proceeded with the sale, ultimately closing the deal at 63 million HKD, a loss of nearly 10 million HKD. Her decision demonstrated a steadfast commitment to her plan, underscoring her independence and determination to safeguard her children's future. Amid these challenges, Choi continued to maintain her personal and professional routines, initially employing 3 personal drivers. She faced additional logistical setbacks when one unexpectedly resigned in early 2020, yet she adapted, demonstrating the same resilience that had characterized her life since youth. Her ability to manage family complexities, navigate business ventures, and maintain composure in the face of external pressures reflected an individual of extraordinary. At the same time, the tension surrounding Alex Kwang's lingering presence remained a subtle but persistent strain, despite their divorce and Choi's clear efforts to sever dependency. Alex maintained a sense of financial and social leverage, occasionally causing discomfort for both Choi and her new family. Even her marriage to Chris, outwardly harmonious, required careful negotiation to ensure that Alex's influence did not disrupt household stability. Choi's continued generosity toward her ex-husband's family contrasted sharply with their attempts to assert control, highlighting her capacity for forgiveness, pragmatism, and strategic thinking. In the weeks leading up to her death, Choi's life appeared, on the surface, to be a model of success and stability. Her fashion career was ascending, her family life seemed balanced, and her financial decisions reflected long-term planning. She maintained a carefully cultivated public image, frequently sharing family moments on social media and attending high-profile events. Yet beneath this polished exterior, the intricate web of past relationships, financial entanglements, and interpersonal conflicts created an environment fraught with potential danger. The convergence of these factors, Choi's ex-husband's unresolved influence, ongoing family pressures, her own independent decision-making, and the inherent complexities of managing wealth and social status, set the stage for a tragedy that would shock Hong Kong and capture international attention. The murder on February 24, 2023, occurred against a backdrop of financial strategy, familial tension, and social prominence, underscoring how even individuals with meticulous planning and foresight can fall victim to violence and betrayal. In retrospect, Choi's final weeks reveal a delicate balancing act. She navigated public and private spheres with poise, managed multiple familial obligations, and pursued ambitious professional goals, all while contending with a past marriage fraught with deception and a present marriage under subtle external pressure. Her ability to maintain composure and resilience under these circumstances speaks to her extraordinary character, yet also underscores the vulnerability inherent in even the most carefully constructed lives. Ultimately, the tragic events surrounding Abby Choi's death reflect not just an isolated act of violence, but a confluence of human complexity, familial loyalty, lingering resentments, financial ambition, and social dynamics. Her story illustrates the fragile boundary between perceived control and actual vulnerability, highlighting how even individuals who appear powerful and successful are not immune to the dangers posed by past conflicts, and unresolved interpersonal tensions endure immense pressure from her ex-husband's family. Abby Choi had made a decision that, in retrospect, would prove tragically consequential. In early 2023. She reluctantly hired Anthony Kwong, her ex-brother-in-law, to serve as her personal driver. While the arrangement initially seemed like a practical solution to help manage her demanding schedule, it would ultimately become an instrument in a meticulously orchestrated plot against Heron. February 21, 2023, at precisely 2:02 p.m. Choi placed her last known phone call to a close friend, B. Tha. That brief conversation would mark the final connection she would have with anyone outside her immediate family before her disappearance. By 2:15 p.m., Choi was observed near her Cattery Hill residence, dressed in a white long-sleeved shirt, matching white pants, and white slippers. With a handbag casually slung over her shoulder, she entered a white 7-seater vehicle driven by Anthony Kwong, a routine arrangement that masked the sinister turn her day would take. As usual, she was scheduled to pick up her children from school, yet she never arrived, vanishing without a trace into the urban labyrinth of Hong Kong. As the night wore on, and Choi failed to return home, Chris Tam Fong Chen, her devoted husband, grew increasingly anxious. Early on February 22nd, with fear overtaking patience, Chris filed an official missing person report with the Hong Kong police. Recognizing the urgency and potential stakes, he offered a reward of 2 million Hong Kong dollars for information that might lead to Choi's safe return. Choi's biological family, equally concerned, added another 2 million to the reward fund. Her close friend contributed an additional 2 million. Bringing the total incentive for any tips leading to her discovery to a staggering 6 million Hong Kong dollars, a testament to the collective worry and love surrounding her disappearance. Immediately following the report, police began to investigate Choi's disappearance with a focus on the Cattery Hill mansion, a property that had recently become a point of intense dispute. Choi's financial entanglements with her ex-husband Alex Kwong's family had been long-standing and complex. She had never officially registered her marriage with Chris, meaning that in the absence of a legal will, her estate would be divided among her 4 children, with at least half potentially allocated to the children from her previous marriage. This financial and inheritance dynamic provided a clear motive for those seeking to undermine or control Choi's assets. Anthony Kwong, as the driver and intermediary, was the first person summoned for questioning. Initially, he attempted to mislead investigators, providing conflicting accounts and false information in an effort to obscure the true circumstances of Choi's disappearance. He claimed that she had exited the vehicle on her own accord, asserting that she simply vanished without explanation. When pressed for dashcam footage from the vehicle, he insisted that the camera had been inoperable, further hampering investigative efforts. Authorities next turned their attention to Choi's former in-laws, Kwong Chow and Jenny Lee, both of whom provided statements that were inconsistent and incomplete. Adding further obfuscation, the investigation hit a dead end when police attempted to locate Alex Kwong, only to discover that he too had vanished. heightening suspicions of a coordinated effort to impede the investigation. Mid this investigative impasse, an unusual development occurred. Choi's mother, Chongyin Fa, contacted police with an account that, on its face, seemed almost supernatural. She described a dream in which Choi appeared to her, indicating that she was in a location marked by the sound of barking dogs, gusts of wind, and a mountain in the distance. In the dream, Choi repeatedly mentioned Taipa, a reference that would soon prove chillingly accurate. In the afternoon of February 24, 2023, the police discovered Choi's remains inside a sparsely furnished house in Lam Suan Village, Taipa, Hong Kong. The scene was both macabre and meticulously arranged. Her legs and arms had been stored in a refrigerator, while other body parts were found disposed of in separate locations within the property. The house itself contained minimal furnishings, a few tables and sofas, no bed, and windows and walls covered by makeshift curtains. Crime scene investigators noted an array of disturbing implements, including a meat grinder, aprons, baskets, face masks, gloves, and other items indicative of deliberate premeditated activity. Through witness accounts and careful reconstruction, police pieced together the harrowing sequence of events. On February 21st, Anthony Kwong had picked up Choi in the 7-seater vehicle. The car then stopped near the entrance of Lion Rock Tunnel, where Alex Kwang boarded. At this juncture, a confrontation ensued between Choi and her ex-husband. Reports indicate that during the altercation, Choi was rendered unconscious by 3:12 p.m. The vehicle had arrived in Lam Suan Village. A second white 7-seater, suspected to have been driven by Kwang Ku, followed behind, transporting tools and implements likely intended for the crime. The involvement of Kwang Ku, the family patriarch, raised questions about the depth of the conspiracy. At 65 years old, his participation was not incidental. Kwang Surka's background, however, provided a dark insight into his capabilities. Formerly a detective sergeant in the Hong Kong police force, he had been awarded both the Long Service Medal and First Class Medal for his contributions to law enforcement, yet his history was marred by misconduct. In 2005, while investigating a criminal case, he abused his position to obtain a victim's personal contact information. He repeatedly harassed the woman and even attempted to assault her at her residence. Legal proceedings resulted in his temporary detainment, a guilty plea, and his resignation, allowing the matter to be quietly resolved. This background suggested a troubling combination of knowledge and capability. Kwang Ku, familiar with legal procedures, could potentially exploit loopholes and evade immediate suspicion while orchestrating criminal activity with a high degree of sophistication. Investigators hypothesized that he may have been the mastermind behind Choi's murder, leveraging both his familiarity with law enforcement and the participation of family members to execute a premeditated plan. From the night of Choi's abduction through the early hours of February 22nd, villagers in Lam Suan reported hearing continuous chopping sounds emanating from the house. Witnesses also recounted overhearing a man and a woman arguing, though they assumed it to be an ordinary domestic dispute and did not alert authorities at the time. One villager, Zhang, noted that the house had been vacant for months and was only recently rented out, approximately 1 to 2 weeks prior to the incident. A white 7-seater vehicle was frequently observed parked in front, reinforcing suspicions of premeditation. Further, investigation revealed that the property had been rented by Chi Wing Kao's mistress. Kao had previously met Kwang Ku 6 months earlier at a massage parlor, where a romantic relationship developed between the two. By mid-February, Chi Wing had also secured another rental apartment at Arc de Triomphe in Hong Kong, suggesting a network of logistical support that facilitated the concealment and disposal of Choi's remains. These facts, combined with the timing and orchestration of the events, strongly indicated that Choi's murder was planned well in advance, rather than being a spontaneous crime of passion. The day Choi's body was recovered, police moved decisively. Anthony Kwang, Kwang Ku, and Jenny Lee were all arrested on charges of obstruction of justice. Subsequent investigations continued, to unearth connections between the individuals, further solidifying the case for premeditation and complicity. Authorities documented the tools, vehicles, and locations involved in the murder, creating a chilling mosaic of methodical execution. As the case unfolded, it became increasingly clear that this tragedy was not merely a result of familial or financial tensions, but rather a complex, orchestrated conspiracy involving multiple members of Choi's former family network. The meticulous planning, deployment of tools, and coordinated movement of individuals underscored the premeditated nature of the crime, reflecting an unsettling degree of calculation and intent. The investigation into Abby Choi's disappearance and murder, culminating in the discovery of her remains, served as a stark reminder of how deeply intertwined family dynamics, financial disputes, and personal vendettas can lead to extreme acts of violence. In this case, her previous acts of generosity toward her ex-husband's family, her efforts to maintain a harmonious relationship across both family units, and her independence in business and personal decisions, placed her tragically in the crosshairs of a meticulously plotted scheme. From the initial disappearance to the discovery of her body, each stage of the investigation highlighted the lengths to which the perpetrators went to conceal their crime, the calculated involvement of trusted family members, the use of multiple locations for concealment, and the prepositioning of tools all revealed a level of forethought that was both disturbing and indicative of a clear intent to commit murder. Choi's final days, therefore, were marked not by random misfortune, but by the deliberate orchestration of those around her. The crime, rooted in a mixture of greed, revenge, and familial entitlement, ultimately resulted in a tragedy that reverberated throughout Hong Kong and the global community, capturing the attention of media outlets and highlighting the vulnerabilities that even prominent and seemingly secure individuals face. On the afternoon of February 25, 2023, a significant breakthrough occurred in the ongoing investigation into Abby Choi's disappearance. Alex Kwong, Choi's ex-husband, who had been evading law enforcement for several days, was apprehended at Tong Chung Pier near Hong Kong International Airport. He was found in possession of over 500,000 Hong Kong dollars in cash and several luxury watches collectively valued at more than 4 million Hong Kong dollars. His capture was the result of meticulous police coordination and intelligence gathering. Alex's attempted escape had been facilitated by a 41-year-old accomplice named Lin Shun, an employee of a yacht rental company. According to police reports, Alex had paid Lin 300,000 Hong Kong dollars and promised additional compensation in exchange for assistance in fleeing Hong Kong by sea to Macau. Authorities determined that the plan was both premeditated and well-resourced, reflecting a level of sophistication consistent with a perpetrator attempting to avoid immediate legal consequences. Just over a week later, on March 6, 2023, Hong Kong police arrested another key individual in the case, Alex's new girlfriend, Pan Howen. She was apprehended while attempting to leave Hong Kong for mainland China. Pan had allegedly coordinated with Lin Shun to facilitate Alex's escape, further entangling her in the case. What made this development particularly shocking was Pan's prior relationship with Choi. Not only had she been romantically involved with Alex, but she had also been a close friend of Abby Choi, attending her birthday party and sharing numerous photographs together. The duality of her loyalties underscored the complexity and betrayal at the heart of the case. Meanwhile, law enforcement mounted an extensive search operation across the Cowan area. Over 100 divers, aerial reconnaissance teams, police dogs, and mobile units were deployed in a coordinated effort to locate additional evidence or Choi's remains. Despite these efforts, the initial days yielded no results, intensifying public concern and media scrutiny. On the afternoon of February 26, 2023, a grim discovery brought the case into sharp focus. Police found Choi's head submerged in a large pot of soup approximately 15 feet tall in a house in Long Matson Village. Carrots and other vegetables accompanied the remains, leading investigators to speculate that the perpetrator attempted to disguise the scene as ordinary kitchen waste, presumably to facilitate disposal without attracting attention. The discovery confirmed what had been feared. Choi had been brutally murdered, and the methods used to conceal her body were both deliberate and chilling by this point. 7 suspects had been arrested in connection with the case. Kwang Koo, Anthony Kwang, and Alex Kwang were charged with murder, and along with Jenny Lee, were denied bail. Pan Hao and Chi Wing Kao and Lin Shun were granted bail, while the investigation continued in mid-March. An 8th suspect emerged when villagers reported seeing a masked individual guarding the house on the day of the murder. Surveillance cameras captured the man's face, though his identity remained under investigation. This revelation suggested a further layer of coordination and planning within the crime, reinforcing suspicions that multiple participants had actively conspired to commit and conceal the murder. The first pretrial hearing was held on May 8, 2023. 6 of the 7 suspects appeared in court, and prosecutors revealed critical forensic evidence linking the individuals to Choi's murder. Blood matching Choi's DNA was found inside her ex-brother-in-law's car, and more than 30 pieces of potential evidence, including knives, chainsaws, and hammers retrieved from the village, were slated for DNA testing by December 2023. Prosecutors also charged Choi's ex-husband and 2 former brothers-in-law with preventing the lawful burial of her body, further expanding the scope of the investigation and highlighting the extensive orchestration behind the crimes of October 2024. The trial remained ongoing. Forensic examinations and the handling of complex evidence had contributed to delays, with courts facing challenges in processing and authenticating materials in a manner that would meet the rigorous standards of criminal proceedings. Authorities anticipated that the trial would resume in early 2025, with the hope that justice would finally be served. Experts analyzing the case noted that perpetrators of murders are often characterized by antisocial tendencies, deep-seated hostility toward their victims, or underlying psychological deficiencies. Yet in Choi's situation, the Kwang family's actions seemed to defy ordinary expectations. The financial disputes that had existed between the Kwangs and Choi did not necessitate such extreme violence. Furthermore, prior to the murder, the relationship between the Kwangs and Choi appeared outwardly harmonious, complicating assumptions about motive and raising questions about the interplay of greed, envy, and familial loyalty. The complex web of relationships between Choi, her ex-husband Alex, her current husband Chris, and the Kwang family became a central topic of public and media discourse. Questions circulated online about the unusual interactions between the families, especially given that Choi had provided significant financial support to Alex's family. Even after her divorce, Chris's family, too, had maintained frequent contact with Alex's relatives. Some observers speculated, without substantiated evidence, that these interactions suggested potential ulterior motives or concealed alliances. Arrest. He retained multiple attorneys and communicated with family members through his legal representatives. Some commentators suggested that the nature of Abby Choi's divorce and financial arrangements might have exceeded what ordinary individuals could fully comprehend. Certain online theories even posited that Alex and Chris could have been involved in a same-sex relationship, with Choi's marriage to Chris serving as a mere formality. However, this theory lacked credibility, as Choi bore Chris 2 children, undermining claims that their marriage was purely symbolic. Further scrutiny was given to the financial arrangements and asset management across the families. Some speculated that Choi's acquisition of a villa under her ex-father-in-law Kwang Surka's name, ostensibly to reduce tax liability, might have concealed more complex intentions. Social media observations and property records suggested that Choi owned numerous luxury goods in her home, far beyond immediate personal needs. Handbags, shoes, and other luxury items were often grouped by style and color, leading some netizens to speculate that this could represent a method of transferring valuable goods overseas. While intriguing, Such claims remain speculative and lack direct evidentiary support. Wealthy individuals often engage in complex asset management, and some experts argued that small tax savings alone would be insufficient motivation for Choi to take extraordinary risks instead. These observers proposed that Choi may have possessed sensitive information or leverage over her ex-father-in-law, providing him with both motive and incentive to orchestrate actions that would secure control over her assets. The convergence of financial, familial, and personal factors likely contributed to the decision-making that culminated in Choi's tragic fate. The pattern of Choi's support for Alex's family also attracted scrutiny despite past criminal behavior, financial instability, and fraud charges against Alex. Choi had consistently provided for him and his relatives. She had funded household help, private drivers, and educational needs for her ex-husband's children, yet these acts of generosity were met with entitlement and continued pressure from Alex's family, including threats and ultimatums that created tension in the months leading up to her murder. Choi's harmonious relationship with Chris, in contrast, highlighted the depth of betrayal by her former family connections. Chris had supported Choi and her children from her previous marriage, maintained close relationships with her extended family, and refrained from engaging in conflicts with Alex's family despite persistent provocations. Yet even this cooperative environment could not shield Choi from the coordinated actions of those who felt entitled to her resources and control over her assets. Police investigators noted the methodical nature of the crime. The execution involved multiple participants, careful timing, and prepositioning of tools, reflecting forethought and coordination. Far beyond a spontaneous act of violence, the presence of multiple vehicles, the use of a refrigerator to store body parts, and the meticulous staging of the crime scene indicated not only intent, but also a willingness to exploit procedural loopholes and familial trust to conceal the offense. By piecing together surveillance footage and witness statements, investigators were able to trace Choi's final movements and identify those complicit in her murder. The coordination between Anthony Kwong, Alex Kwong, Kwong Koo, and other family members revealed a conspiracy that extended across generational and relational lines. Even peripheral participants, such as Pan Howen and Lin Shun, were implicated in supporting roles, highlighting the depth of planning and the extent of complicity. Public reaction to the case has been intense. The combination of familial betrayal, financial disputes, and the calculated brutality of the murder captured widespread attention. Media outlets across Hong Kong, mainland China, and international networks have covered the story extensively, emphasizing both the human tragedy and the legal complexities involved. Social media has become a platform for discussion, speculation, and analysis, with citizens debating motives, alliances, and the broader implications for wealth, power, and familial obligations in contemporary society. The ongoing trial continues to navigate intricate forensic challenges. DNA evidence must be carefully examined, chain of custody protocols maintained, and testimony corroborated to ensure the integrity of the proceedings. Each day of court presents both procedural and ethical challenges, balancing the need for a thorough, fair trial with public demand for accountability and justice. Legal analysts note that cases involving multi-generational complicity, premeditation, and asset disputes are inherently complex, requiring meticulous attention to detail and cautious interpretation of evidence. Despite these obstacles, law enforcement remains committed to pursuing justice for Abby Choi. Authorities have emphasized the importance of transparency and due process, while coordinating across multiple investigative divisions, including criminal investigation units, forensic teams, and external legal consultants. The commitment to resolving the case underscores the broader societal imperative to ensure that premeditated acts of violence, particularly those involving abuse of familial trust and financial leverage, are met with legal accountability. The case also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked entitlement, familial manipulation, and the vulnerabilities faced by individuals attempting to navigate complex social, financial, and relational landscapes. Choi's life, marked by both remarkable generosity and professional success, ultimately intersected tragically with individuals motivated by greed, resentment, and perceived entitlement. Her murder reflects the devastating consequences of these dynamics and the importance of vigilance, legal safeguards, and ethical responsibility in managing wealth, relationships, and personal safety. As the trial progresses into 2025, authorities, legal professionals, and the public await the conclusion with high expectations. It is hoped that the judicial process will not only hold the perpetrators accountable, but also provide clarity and closure for Choi's family, friends, and the wider community. The combination of forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and detailed investigative work positions the case to become a landmark in Hong Kong's legal history, illustrating both the complexity of modern criminal conspiracies and the resilience of law enforcement in addressing sophisticated, multi-layered crimes. Ultimately, Abby Choi's story is a reminder of both human vulnerability and the resilience of justice. Her life, tragically cut short by those closest to her, highlights the perils of familial manipulation and financial exploitation. Yet through the persistent efforts of investigators, the judicial system, and public scrutiny, there remains hope that accountability will prevail and that the lessons drawn from this case will inform future protections for those at risk of similar betrayals. Even after her divorce, Abby Choi continued to provide support for her ex-husband's family, a fact that has left many questions unanswered regarding her motivations and the dynamics surrounding her murder. Online discourse about the case has been both intense and confusing, with rumors, speculation, and partial information clouding public understanding of the complex relationships among the three families involved. While only further police investigation could definitively clarify the events and motives, what remains clear is the stark contrast between public perception of famous women and Abby Choi's actual character. Society often places famous women under a microscope, associating them with superficiality, ostentation, or negative behaviors. Choi defied all these stereotypes. Those who knew her consistently described her as kind-hearted, deeply ethical, and committed to charitable causes. She treated everyone with respect and courtesy, including household staff. Her mother-in-law once remarked that Choi demonstrated more care and consideration than her own biological children on birthdays and special occasions. She made a point of gathering her family together for celebrations, and she never failed to remember the housekeeper, maid, or driver, often presenting them with gifts as a gesture of gratitude. Abby Choi's compassion extended far beyond her immediate circle. She was a passionate advocate for stray animals, founding a charitable organization with her friend in bow tie. The charity donated 10 million Hong Kong dollars annually to support volunteers caring for stray dogs and cats. On February 28, 2023, the charity publicly announced a name change to include Happy in honor of Choi's contributions and legacy. That same day, Chris, Choi's husband, along with her family and friends, visited the morgue to identify her body. They then returned to the crime scene in Long Matson Village to pay their respects. Chris offered incense and tearfully expressed his gratitude for having known her, saying, "I'm very grateful to have met you." Her mother-in-law also wept openly, pledging to care for Choi's for children and lamenting the injustice of her death. "Abby, your death was unjust. Your kindness was misplaced. My foolish child, those wolves devoured your heart indeed." The kindness that had guided Choi throughout her life had been cruelly exploited for the Kwong family. No act of generosity could ever be sufficient. Gratitude was foreign to them, and responsibility for their actions was absent. Choi's story reflects the stark reality that excessive goodwill, when met with greed and malice, can become a vulnerability rather than a virtue. Abby Choi's early marriage, at just 18, had already placed her in vulnerable circumstances. Her first husband, Alex Kwong, who had once been her lover, eventually became both her ex-husband and her murderer. Step by step, she fell into a trap laid by his family. As outsiders, we may never fully comprehend her mental journey, her hopes, or her reasoning perhaps. She genuinely believed in the principles instilled during her childhood, that kindness would ultimately be rewarded, but life's harsh truths often defy such moral simplicity. Stories from history and fiction, from East Fable of the Farmer and the Snake, to contemporary cautionary tales, like the Korean film Parasite, illustrate that goodness alone does not guarantee safety or justice. Sometimes virtue is met with cruelty, no matter how pure or steadfast. In Choi's case, her life ended tragically, her generosity weaponized against her by those she once trusted. Story 4. The case of the neglected child in Pocheon, South Korea. On the evening of July 29, 2014, the oppressive heat of a summer night in Pocheon, Gyeonggi Province, South Korea, hung over an otherwise quiet apartment complex. Though the sun had long since set, the air remained stifling, and a handful of elderly residents lingered outdoors, chatting softly. At first, the faint sound of crying from a neighboring apartment went largely unnoticed, but as the minutes passed, the crying became louder, more insistent, and impossible to ignore. The voices seemed to belong to a young boy, calling repeatedly for his mother, concerned for the child's welfare. Neighbors attempted to make contact with the apartment's occupants. Knocking went unanswered, and the cries persisted unabated, prompting them to call the local police and fire department. Authorities arrived swiftly, and, after multiple unsuccessful attempts to gain entry, decided to access the apartment via a door. Apartment was deceptively ordinary from the outside. A simple door led into a small living room, with a hallway extending toward the kitchen and bedrooms. The guest bedroom lay on the west side, while the master bedroom occupied the east. Upon entry, officials were confronted with a scene that would horrify even seasoned responders. The apartment was inundated with garbage, with 19 enormous green trash bags nearly the height of an adult stacked throughout the space. Flies swarmed amidst the decay, spreading an unbearable stench. The floorboards and door frames were rotting. Walls cracked, and peeling traces of former luxury remained in the furniture, now smothered by thick layers of dust and mold. The apartment was a mausoleum of neglect, almost impossible to imagine as the living space of a human being. Following the cries, authorities found a young boy in the master bedroom, likely between 5 and 6 years old. His thin frame and visible ribcage indicated severe malnutrition. His eyes, clouded and slightly bluish, reflected a vacant, lifeless gaze, and he remained absorbed in his sorrow, crying silently while staring at a television that appeared to serve as his sole refuge from the world. When he noticed the police, his cries intensified, his face etched with exhaustion and despair. Gradually, with patience and gentle reassurance, the officers calmed him enough to speak when questioned about why he was alone. The boy's responses were fragmented, reflecting both confusion and trauma. It soon became evident that he had been systematically neglected, living in conditions that constituted prolonged abuse and severe deprivation. The investigation revealed that the boy had been isolated and subjected to ongoing neglect for months, if not years. Authorities discovered little evidence of any adult intervention or concern from neighbors or family members, highlighting the systemic failures that allowed such conditions to persist. This case quickly drew national attention, sparking outrage and calls for reform in child protection services. Psychologists emphasize the long-term consequences of such trauma, including cognitive delays, emotional disorders, and attachment issues that would likely affect the child for the rest of his life. Local authorities conducted extensive interviews with neighbors, family members, and caregivers. The accounts painted a disturbing picture. The boy's parents were frequently absent, and the apartment had long been allowed to deteriorate into uninhabitable conditions. Social workers discovered inadequate nutrition, unsanitary conditions, and a lack of medical attention. The child's mental and physical state prompted emergency protective custody, while prosecutors prepared to file criminal charges against the responsible adults for neglect and endangerment involved in the investigation noted that cases like this are not isolated incidents. They reflect broader societal issues, including the marginalization of vulnerable families, the gaps in monitoring high-risk households, and the need for stronger community awareness. The tragedy underscored the crucial role of neighbors and social services in preventing neglect from escalating to life-threatening conditions in the weeks following the rescue. Authorities worked to rehabilitate the child. Psychologists, pediatricians, and social workers collaborated to stabilize his physical health and provide trauma-informed care. The boy received intensive nutritional support and therapy designed to address the psychological scars of neglect. While recovery would be long and fraught with challenges, experts stressed the importance of early intervention and consistent support in helping children regain trust in adults and reintegrate into safe, nurturing environments. Community response was also notable. Local charities and volunteers rallied to support the child, providing clothing, educational materials, and ongoing emotional support. Awareness campaigns highlighted the importance of vigilance in identifying and reporting suspected cases of child neglect, encouraging neighbors and school personnel to act when warning signs appeared. The Pochin case serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of childhood when protective structures fail. It contrasts sharply with the story of Abby Choi, whose generosity and compassion were exploited by adults, yet who herself maintained her own resilience and care for others despite adversity. Both cases illustrate, in different ways, the impact of adult actions on vulnerable individuals, one through malice and exploitation, the other through neglect and societal failure. Together, these narratives underscore the need for vigilance, accountability, and ethical responsibility in protecting those who cannot protect themselves, whether through charitable work, legal intervention, or social advocacy. The common thread is the necessity of adult responsibility to shield children and vulnerable individuals from harm. When questioned, the boy could only offer a brief response, his weakness making his words nearly incomprehensible. Recognizing his fragile health, the police decided to take him to the nearest Child Protective Services facility there. He was finally able to eat a full meal. What surprised everyone, however, was the way he handled the food. Despite obvious hunger that left him dizzy, he carefully divided it into small portions, each roughly half the size of a normal serving for a child his age. He then consumed only the smallest portion, adhering to this method as if following an unspoken rule. Witnessing this behavior left the officers both heartbroken and puzzled, unable to understand the rationale behind it. The oddities did not end there initially. The overwhelming stench in the apartment was assumed to be from accumulated trash, but as the police approached the guest bedroom across from the master bedroom, the odor intensified dramatically. An officer cautiously opened the door. Though small, the room was similarly filled with garbage. At its center stood a massive red plastic container, approximately 315 inches tall and 33 inches in diameter. Nearby lay a mobile phone. The container's lid was weighted down with a 22-pound bag of salt, giving the object an ominous presence. After deliberation, the officers decided to open it. Inside, they found a purple blanket covering the contents. As they carefully lifted the blanket, a chill ran through the room. Submerged in an unidentifiable liquid was a body in an advanced state of decomposition. The prolonged heat had accelerated the decay, making the remains almost unrecognizable, initially resembling thick porridge or fermented fish paste. The container was transported to a secure location for further examination. As the liquid was drained, a jumble of human bones became visible. Shockingly, 2 skulls soon rolled out, revealing that the container held not one, but 2 victims. The second body had been placed directly beneath the first, separated only by a thin blanket. This arrangement suggested deliberate intent by the perpetrator, perhaps to prevent the bodies from mixing, or for reasons known only to them. Forensic Analysis determined that both victims were men between 40 and 50 years old. The top victim had died about a year prior. Around his neck were 3 loops of a scarf, approximately 6.5 feet long, and his face was tightly wrapped in plastic wrap, more than 3 feet in length. The container had been filled with salt, possibly in an attempt to slow decomposition, though it was largely ineffective. The lower victim had been dead for over 15 years. Causes of death for both remained unclear. The mixture of bodily fluids made identification extremely difficult. The only remaining clue was a partially preserved finger with an intact fingerprint. Police immediately commissioned the National Forensic Service to reconstruct it in hopes of identifying the victims. The discovery sent shockwaves through Pin City. Fear and confusion gripped the community, and investigators felt immense pressure to solve the case quickly, identify the victims, and apprehend the perpetrator. The very next day, the Pin City Police formed a special investigation team of 60 elite members. Their first task was to interview residents around the apartment in hopes of finding clues about the boy's parents. Surprisingly, the neighbors' responses deepened. The mystery most insisted they had never seen the boy before, raising questions about how he could have lived in such isolation for so long. They remembered seeing a woman living in the apartment roughly 20 days earlier, but described her as rarely at home. Her visits brief before disappearing, again through investigation. The police tracked down the boy's eldest half-brother, Mr. Park. He revealed that the child shared the same mother, but had a different father. The boy's father had been missing for a long time, and Mr. Park was currently unable to contact their mother. He admitted that, having moved out to live with his grandparents, he had paid little attention to his younger half-brother. Assuming the child had been sent away by their mother, the investigation ultimately identified the boy's mother as Lee Young-sak, a 51-year-old woman whose employment and whereabouts had been difficult to trace. Further complicating the case, Lee Young-suk, born in Jeongup City, worked at a candy factory and had long struggled with chronic depression and an unstable personality, traits that made her socially isolated and difficult for others to approach. The boy's father, Park Dong-in, was employed at a pig farm in Pochin City, but his background was even more mysterious. Records, including bank statements, medical files, and phone logs, revealed no trace of him for the past 15 years, as if he had vanished entirely. According to Park Dong-in's parents, he had once had an affair and may have run away with another woman. The mobile phone found beside the red container was registered under Park Dong-in's name, though its last usage had been in 2013, a year before the body was discovered. Strangely, the contact number associated with the phone belonged to a colleague of Lee Young-suk, suggesting that Lee herself may have been using her missing husband's phone. The reason for this remained unclear, given the severity of the case. Police issued a nationwide warrant for Lee on charges of murder and concealment of bodies. Just 1 day later, surveillance cameras in Sui Pochin City captured her leaving work an hour early and hurriedly departing the factory. The area, a densely packed industrial zone, with many foreign workers living in factory dormitories, made containment challenging. Authorities immediately deployed personnel to search the dormitories and interview workers, but no significant leads emerged. Investigators then examined Lee's call logs, uncovering an unusual pattern. Every day around dawn, she would place a 10-minute call to a mysterious number. Police suspected that the owner of this number was connected to Lee, and that the person's location could indicate where she was hiding. August 2nd. Police arrived at a textile factory dormitory in Sanu. A 44-year-old South Asian man opened the door, claiming to be from Sri Lanka, and initially refused police entry, pretending not to understand Korean. After being presented with a search warrant, he silently gestured toward the kitchen. There, Lee was discovered hiding in only her underwear, suggesting she had concealed herself in haste. She was taken to Pan Police Station during interrogation. Lee did not attempt to hide her actions and quickly confessed to killing 2 people, softly sobbing, "I was wrong." On the same day, the National Forensic Service successfully reconstructed a fingerprint from a thumb confirming one victim as young Suan, 48 years old, who had been both Lee's colleague and lover according to Lee's confession. She had met Young in 2012 at the candy factory, and they quickly began an affair. 2 months later, they were romantically involved. Often meeting at Young's house, Lee demanded that Young hand over his entire salary, which he willingly did, blinded by love however. Factory rules strictly prohibited employee relationships, and when the director discovered their affair, learned Lee was married, Young was deemed untrustworthy and was fired immediately by May 2013. Lee was forced to break off the relationship. Young, now jobless and heartbroken, demanded repayment of the money he had given her. Lee, having spent the funds on their shared life, refused, leading to escalating tensions over the next 2 months. Young frequently confronted Lee at the factory, demanding repayment. Lee borrowed money from various sources to appease him, but it was insufficient. Their once loving bond had dissolved into hostility. In July 2013, Young visited Lee's home in Sinok, Pochin City, to reclaim his money. Initially, Lee remained silent, pouring them both drinks and suggesting they share a toast. Young, though puzzled, drank while continuing to demand repayment. After some time, Lee finally warned him, if he persisted, she would take her own life and end his. Angered and humiliated, Young slapped her across the face in response. Lee acted with sudden force. She pushed him to the ground, sat on top of him, and used both hands to strangle him, wrapping a scarf tightly around his neck. Young struggled violently, but his movements were weak. Lee, who battled depression and frequently relied on sleeping pills, had a fragile mental state that intensified the situation at this moment. The pills she carried dissolved silently, adding another layer to the unfolding tragedy. By the time Young realized what was happening, it was far too late. He collapsed, unresponsive. While Lee Young-suk displayed no sign of remorse, she took a roll of plastic wrap and bound his face tightly, winding it multiple times to ensure he could not move. She then wrapped him in a blanket and moved the body to the guest bedroom for a prolonged period. She left the body untouched, allowing it to decompose naturally. It was only after the decomposition had begun that she retrieved the large plastic container she had used 15 years earlier. She placed Young's body inside, stacked it atop another body, and poured in a significant amount of salt, apparently attempting to slow decomposition. The identity of the upper victim in the container was finally clear: Young Suan, but the other body, according to Lee's initial confession, was a foreign man she claimed she had encountered on the street 15 years ago. She had alleged that he demanded money, and when she refused, she had overpowered and killed him, later enlisting the help of another foreigner for a modest payment to hide the corpse. However, forensic DNA testing would later reveal that the lower victim was not a foreigner at all. He was Park Dong-in, 41 years old, Lee's missing husband, and a native Korean. When confronted by the police about this revelation, Lee changed her story. She claimed that she had not killed her husband, asserting that 15 years prior, she had awoken one morning to find him dead on their balcony. Out of love and grief, she allegedly placed his body in the container to preserve his memory. This explanation was quickly dismissed as implausible. Investigators continued to examine the couple's history, but the events had occurred so long ago that evidence was scarce and inconclusive. In August 7th, forensic examination provided a crucial breakthrough. Traces of doxylamine, a sedative ingredient in prescription sleeping pills, were found in both Young Suan's and Park Dong-in's remains. Doxylamine, when taken in normal doses, helps induce sleep, but in excess, it can lead to coma or death. Investigators discovered that Lee had purchased sleeping pills containing this chemical 15 years earlier, raising further suspicion about her involvement. Confronted with this undeniable evidence, Lee eventually admitted to both murders and provided a full account of her actions. The timeline of events traces back to 1985, when Lee, at 22 years old, worked at a garment factory in Seoul. There she met Park Dong-in, who was a year older. The pair quickly fell in love, and Lee became pregnant before marriage. A year later, relocated to Pochin City to live with Park's parents, and soon after, their first son was born 3 years later. Their second son arrived to facilitate Park's work at a distant pig farm. The family of 4 moved into an apartment with his parents in Sibuan, Pochin. City life continued relatively normally until May 1995, when a tragic accident occurred. On Highway 325 in Sinok, Pochin City, a sand truck overturned, spilling 10 tons of sand and crushing their 6-year-old son. As he attempted to cross the road, the boy died instantly. The loss devastated Lee and left permanent emotional scars, triggering severe depression that forced her reliance on sedatives and sleeping pills following the tragedy. Lee and Park began to blame each other for their child's death. Straining their marriage arguments became increasingly frequent, affecting Lee's physical and mental well-being in 2000. Her health worsened to the point that she required major surgery for a ruptured facial blood vessel. Park, increasingly resentful and detached, often stayed out late and sometimes did not return home for months. By 2003, he had engaged in an extramarital affair, intensifying Lee's depression and fueling deep-seated resentment in response. Lee began seeking solace outside her home, meeting men along the Songui River in Pochin City. These liaisons offered an escape from her reality, providing temporary relief from her emotional pain. By the fall of 2004, Lee had decided to take drastic measures against her husband. She surreptitiously administered a large dose of sleeping pills and blood pressure medication in his water, deceiving him by claiming it was medicine for nasal inflammation. The result was fatal. Park Dong-un died before her eyes despite witnessing his death. Lee showed no outward emotion. She calmly wrapped his body in a blanket and placed it in the same plastic container she had prepared for Yong years later. In the aftermath, Lee expertly concealed the truth, fabricating stories and creating a narrative that hid her crimes from all those around her. The case revealed a harrowing timeline of grief, betrayal, and calculated violence, beginning with personal tragedy and culminating in 2 cold-blooded murders. Lee's reliance on sedatives, her psychological deterioration following her child's death, and her escalating animosity toward her husband and former lover created a perfect storm of circumstances that ultimately led to this gruesome outcome. Following the mysterious death of Park Dong-un, Lee Young-sok continued to fabricate stories to conceal her actions. She routinely claimed that her husband had abandoned her, running away with another woman. This narrative, carefully constructed, not only deflected suspicion from herself, but also manipulated her in-laws, who, believing her story, felt sympathy and guilt. They consequently limited contact with Lee, unwittingly enabling her to continue concealing her crimes. Without interference in the ensuing years, Lee led a promiscuous lifestyle, frequently engaging in relationships with multiple men. Neighbors would often observe a steady rotation of visitors to her apartment, each staying briefly before disappearing, reinforcing a sense of chaos and detachment from societal norms. In 2006, Lee gave birth to a son at Wujunga Street, Mary's Hospital in Jangi. The child's father was neither Yong Suan nor the Sri Lankan man who had briefly sheltered Lee, but a Bangladeshi man. Lee exhibited little anticipation or joy at the birth, and she consistently neglected her maternal responsibilities. She rarely interacted with her son and often left him alone in the apartment for extended periods. Her neglect extended to the basics of childcare. She provided only the bare minimum of food, typically hastily purchased bread and milk from nearby convenience stores. For the first 8 years of his life, the boy existed entirely within the confines of 4 walls, deprived of social interaction and human contact beyond Lee herself, due to chronic malnutrition. He was significantly smaller than other children his age, though chronologically 8. He physically resembled a 5 or 6-year-old. His world was limited to a television, a phone capable only of making calls, and the morbid presence of 2 decomposing bodies in the apartment. The child found a rare semblance of comfort in watching television, which became his primary source of amusement and distraction. For from the grim reality surrounding him. Experts later noted that his pale blue eyes, observed by the police at the time of his rescue, were likely the result of prolonged exposure to dim lighting, compounded by years of malnutrition and lack of stimulation. As for the Sri Lankan man who had briefly sheltered Lee, initial suspicion fell on him regarding potential complicity in her crimes. However, upon further investigation, authorities determined that he lacked both the opportunity and capacity to participate. He had arrived in South Korea to work in a textile factory for a 6-month term, and had no access to the crime scene or resources to carry out such acts. Although initially reticent during police questioning, he eventually disclosed Lee's hiding place, enabling authorities to apprehend her given his lack of criminal intent or direct involvement. The prosecution ultimately decided not to press charges against him by February 2015. The case reached the Wujongga District Court. Lee Young-suk faced multiple charges, including 2 counts of murder and 1 count of concealing bodies. Prosecutors emphasized that, despite her diagnosed depression, her prolonged concealment of the victims and chronic neglect of her son warranted a severe sentence. The initial verdict held Lee guilty on all charges, resulting in a 24-year prison sentence. Dissatisfied with the judgment, Lee immediately filed an appeal. During her appeal, Lee radically altered her testimony. She claimed that Park Dong-un had died of natural causes, and that her only role had been to place his body in a plastic container. Her eldest son, Park, who had previously informed police that his father had been missing for 15 years, also changed his story, asserting that his father had passed from illness and that he had assisted his mother in placing the body into the container to preserve it. This development prompted police to investigate his motives. Why would he participate in such an act? A polygraph test revealed that he was truthful in his statements. Park explained that, under South Korean law, the statute of limitations for concealing a body was 7 years. Since Park Dong-un had died 15 years prior, he could not be prosecuted for assisting in hiding the body. The doxulamine detected in his body did not definitively indicate a lethal dosage, leaving the cause of death unconfirmed. Consequently, evidence against Lee regarding her husband's death was insufficient. In September 2015, the appeal trial commenced at the Seoul High Court. Judges weighed multiple mitigating factors: Lee's poor health, mental instability, the unclear circumstances surrounding Park Dong-un's death, and the absence of conclusive evidence directly linking her to the murder. The court confirmed that Lee had murdered Young Soo-un and concealed his body, but the charge regarding her husband was deemed unsubstantiated. The initial 24-year sentence was reduced to 18 years in prison. Lee, still dissatisfied, attempted additional appeals, which culminated in a Supreme Court review. The court upheld the High Court's decision, reasoning that Lee's act of hiding her husband's body, while unusual and morbid, was driven by her impulsive and borderline personality disorders. These disorders impaired her judgment and intention, rendering the concealment legally insufficient. As evidence of homicide, the case ignited public debate across South Korea. Critics argued that the courts had overemphasized procedural and psychological considerations, while minimizing the tangible consequences of Lee's actions. They noted that she had intentionally ended 2 lives and subjected her child to prolonged neglect and suffering. Many questioned whether the law adequately addressed the severity of the outcomes, even when mental health was factored into legal responsibility. Discussions also emerged regarding the physical plausibility of her actions. Lee had claimed that she had subdued and moved Young Soo-un, a man weighing approximately 220 pounds, into a container alone. Skeptics argued that it would have been exceedingly difficult for a woman to move such a robust adult without assistance, particularly in the life or death context. She described this concern highlighted the potential involvement of her son or other unknown individuals. Though evidence remained circumstantial, ultimately, Lee Young-suk's story serves as a disturbing case study in human psychology, mental illness, and the interplay between crime, negligence, And Societal Oversight Story 5 recounts the tragic circumstances surrounding Korean-American twins Sunny and Gina Han, born on April 4, 1974. Sunny arrived 5 minutes before Gina. In many Asian cultures, even a small difference in birth order carries symbolic significance. The older sibling is traditionally expected to shoulder greater responsibility, caring for the family and supporting the younger sibling. This cultural expectation would play a subtle but meaningful role in the twins' lives. Tragedy struck early at the age of 3. The Han family disintegrated following their parents' divorce. Custody arrangements split the twins apart. Sunny stayed with their mother, while Gina remained with their father. Soon thereafter, their father remarried, abandoning the responsibility of raising 6 children for older siblings in addition to the twins.